Professionals. How have ignorant idiots misinterpreted or minimized your job? My wife described my job to me as tootling around on the computer all day. I'm the sole database administrator for my entire company. Oh boy, every conversation I have when people ask what I do. I say I'm the system administrator for a university, and inevitably they answer, "So, you fix computers?" "Sure." At school, my niece told her class that her dad plays golf and drinks beer for a job. He's a doctor that left the medical field to work in consulting. My ex of 5 years described my job as, "All you do all day is go diving." Oil rigs don't build themselves, and making a dive to 200 feet to install a pipeline is no small task. Nor is doing mid-water work on installing anodes on a caisson, but she never complained about the money I made. I heard about an incident a couple of weeks ago in the North Sea where a guy got cut off from umbilical for 45 minutes. He hugged the pipeline and passed out on an 8-minute oxygen supply. They managed to revive him after that. Your job is terrifying. Respect. My best friend called me a pipetting slave monkey. I'm a genetics PhD. She is absolutely right, though. Many people think I'm only a kind of butcher, killing animals all day and extracting their brains. I do preclinical research in the field of Alzheimer's disease. Every time I tell someone what I do, they respond with, "Oh, you're the guy that parks the plane." I'm an air traffic controller, tower control. Ugh, dressing up like a working girl. I dress up as Disney princesses and fairies with other girls, and I visit children's birthday parties and mostly terminally ill children. I think if people use this particular criticism, it raises a lot more questions about their free time and bedroom lives than it does about your job. What are they paying people to do in their own time? I got told the only reason I wanted to be a theater techie was so that I wouldn't have to get up early in the morning. I really wanted to call and wake that person up at 6:30 in the morning yesterday when I was unloading a truck in the rain. I'm the only girl at an IT consulting company. My grandmother told me it was a good thing because this way I have a better chance of sleeping my way to the top. As a male in the IT field with mainly female bosses, your grandmother is either very wrong or very right, as I can't get promoted no matter what I do. I'm currently getting my PhD in ecology. My grandfather said he couldn't wait for me to get home so I could landscape his yard. A couple of family members have made comments about how I don't have to do any work and that I just sign the checks. I own an IT company. I've tried to explain that I typically put in 40 to 60 hours a week, and that if I screw up at my job, a whole lot of people won't even have a job to come to, but they still don't get it. On a similar note, at my old job, my coworkers and I, engineers, used to make fun of the technical lead on a project because about 75% of his time was talking with the customers. We'd say things like, "Oh, you're just looking at graphs and meeting with the customers again, eh?" "Yeah, those emails won't write themselves, better get cracking." Sipping martinis with the bigwigs again? Real tough job you've got there. Then he started CCing us on the emails and including us in the meetings. We stopped making fun of him. A policeman whose life I had the pleasure of saving referred to me and my fellow EMTs as an overpriced taxi service. We'll see who's laughing next time he gets shot. I'm just kidding, I'll still treat him. I'm a video game designer, and I will never hear the end of it. Apparently, I just look at the computer and games are made. The best response I got came from a cabbie. "So, what do you do?" "I'm a game designer, I make video games." "What, they're made?" "No, they grow on trees, we just harvest them." Sometimes we say that the pipe fitters on site are plumbers and the civil engineers are rebar layers. They don't like it. I work at one of the top recording studios in the city, one of 2 employees in its 40 years that didn't go to school for audio engineering. I got my education for free while I was getting paid. I didn't come into the job blind, I got hired based on what I could do and had already done. I was making a real salary and living in my own place, while my friends were barely halfway through university. My grandma won't accept that I can have a good job without having gone to school, and she doesn't understand what I could possibly do for sound in television ads, movies, and video games. She tries to convince me to go back to school every time I see her. Her new husband said I should become a security guard. We should swap grandmas. I'm still working on my master's, and finally, after working full-time and school part-time, I'm in a situation where I can go to school full-time and finish this thing. Since then, all I hear from my grandmother is, "Do you have a job yet?" or "Get a job." She sees education for women as something you do when you're young and fairly useless after adulthood has started. So I feel your reverse pain. I'm an on-call locksmith that works graveyard, so literally my job consists of sitting around my house and getting paid waiting for the phone to ring. It's a pretty easy job, the only drawback is that I have to stay up until 7 a.m. The other day my girlfriend was giving me crap about what I did all night by saying, "All you do is smoke green herb and tickle your pickle while you're at work. Oh, and that Reddit website too." She's 100% accurate. I used to be a hospital microbiologist. I get a lot of, "Oh, so like all you do is take blood?" Yeah, sure, because we needed a 4-year degree to learn how to take blood, and infectious diseases identify themselves with their own cute little micro-driver's license. The kicker? I suck at taking blood. I get called a glorified babysitter all the time. I'm a kindergarten teacher. My wife thinks she's hilarious when I say that I had a rough day as a VMware engineer by responding, "Did you get tired from all the waiting and clicking?" You just touch people for money. I'm a massage therapist. I'm a bank teller, and while at Subway last week, the guy making my sandwich told me I have it so easy and that I just give people money all day. I wanted to say, no, you just sit here and make sandwiches all day, and people get a lot more upset when there's a problem with their life savings rather than when they don't get enough mustard on their sub. This might be one of those grass is always greener situations. I feel like bank tellers are a little higher on the social pecking order at least, but then again, you probably have to deal with stuffier and more dismissive clientele than you would at Subway. Then again, I'd rather do anything than work in hospitality for a living again, so I'll try getting screamed at by rich jerks any day. I would never purposefully trivialize my husband's job, but when people ask me what he does, I usually say he's in IT. He hates this. He's a computer programmer and software developer. The thing is, most people I know don't really know what a programmer or developer does, but they know IT means he works with computers. I've actively been trying to catch myself and now say computer programmer when someone asks. Better than my grandma at least. When people ask what he does, she says, "Computers." But hey, she's 80, so that's actually good for her. My ex-girlfriend didn't appreciate my business. I own and run a poker league. We have over 400 players each season. I have 4 part-time employees. I do all the accounting, marketing, and web updating myself. Because our games are at bars, she thought all I did was hang out with friends and drink beer all night. She said she didn't feel I was challenged enough. The challenge was paying for all of our bills while she didn't make any money. Play games all day. I work in QA. We have to break a game, not play it. There's a different mentality to it. You play a game to enjoy the experience. If you're QA, you're interfacing with that game to understand and to learn its imperfections within its code. We also have to then record our findings. It's like practical science experiments in a universe someone else has created, and you're confined to one space. In that space, you do all as you may do to make something happen that's not supposed to happen. It's awfully repetitive and can make you never want to play the most awesome games ever again. Like, for example, entering and leaving a certain section of the level multiple times for hours on end. There are multiple different ways, over and over again, documenting the outcomes and identifying where the glitches and bugs may exist. I heard it truly is like taking all the fun out of a game. When do I get to shoot stuff? Never. Keep walking in circles and tell me when you see any clipping. My girlfriend told me, "You just play on the internet all day." I work as an industrial programmer and ordering systems administrator. I work in an office for the Department of Transport. I have nothing whatsoever to do with the operational side of things like selling tickets, running buses and trains. However, after 3 years, I still get odd moments from my mum when there are transport delays that suggest she thinks I can get called out to help direct buses or some crap. I've tried to explain what I do, but I don't really think it's stuck. My dad said that all I do at work, KFC, is serve people chicken. Get lost, bunt. I wash the trays too. Pharmacy. Why does it take 20 minutes to count out 30 tablets? Says the irate customer. Well, I also have to enter the RX, check that it doesn't interact with any other med you're on, make sure it's the proper dose and medication for your problem, make sure you're taking the medication correctly, deal with the rejection from your insurance company because the doctor wrote for an obscenely expensive substance, count the medication, and then double-check everything I just did. I also have to stop working on yours to answer questions about over-the-counter medications and responding to, "Where is the bread?" or "What wiper blades do I need for my car?" And I apologize, but there were 30 patients in front of you. Now that it's filled, I need to come talk to you and ensure that you understand everything, since your doctor most likely didn't tell you it all. It's not fast food pharmacy. I have 8 years of school to be able to do this. I hold your life in my hands. My dad filmed a video of my sister massaging a horse. She's a failed horse massage therapist. And then he told me my job was easy and he didn't see why people pay me so much. I'm a high-end surgical videographer. I have to intricately know the ins and outs of dozens of types of surgeries, and frequently I have to know how to do it better than the surgeon I'm filming. Yes, I frequently see the world's best surgeons make mistakes or take extreme and flippant risks with patients. Whenever I tell people I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, they ask if I can read people's minds. I instantly peg them as a moron. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My friend, who's a nurse, suggested that my job as a care assistant was pretty much not needed as nurses really do all the proper work. All we apparently do is change the patients. When a resident or patient is dying in my work, it's not the nurse that sits with them or their family offering comfort, it's not the nurse who sits with them until they've stopped breathing, nor is it the nurse who washes and dresses the body after they've passed. In fact, other than turning on oxygen or occasionally giving out tablets and handing out important-looking reports, our nurses don't interact with the residents or patients much at all. Our nurses can't even tell the family what their mum or dad has eaten all day, how they slept, or what he did before bed, without a care assistant reporting this in information. I'm not saying that nurses aren't needed, by the way, but both jobs are as important as the other. And look, I can't overstate this enough, I don't hate nurses. I've had some very positive experiences while as a patient in the ICU myself, and a lot of my friends are nursing grads. I'm also aware in hospital the nursing situation is very different. This is my reaction to a comment made by a nurse I know, and my experience in my workplace. So please, if you're a nurse, don't take offense. I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and I work as an IT project manager. People can never quite understand how the two go together. Motivation? Understanding what needs to be done? Teams of people working together to achieve a singular goal? Effective communication on multiple levels? Psychology? Huh? I just don't see the connection there. I work for the US Air Force. My job is a munitions inspector. I have to inspect all outbound and inbound munitions, as well as a periodic inspection on all munitions in the bomb dump. The fact that I work with millions of dollars of high-value explosives daily means nothing to my wife. I've seen people get seriously injured on the job, as well as heard horror stories of fingers being shot off by 20mm or people burning to death from a flare mishap. I go home some days exhausted and covered in residue, and my wife just hands me my son and says, "Ugh, I need a break from him." As if I didn't just work with explosives all day. She wakes up at 8:30, I have to be at work for 6:45. He takes at least 2 one-hour naps a day. And sometimes I might go home for lunch to find her either passed out on the couch or watching Family Feud or The Price is Right. Look, it sounds like you do indeed have a very serious job, but it honestly sounds like you both need to get a healthy amount of respect for the work the other puts into running your household, because parenthood is no joke either. I work from home. That doesn't mean I sleep in until 11 AM and sit around watching TV all day. It means that when I'm working on a project, I work almost around the clock because I live and work in the same place. When I don't have a project, I'm incredibly busy catching up on all of the housework and errands that get neglected when I do have a project. We have a 110-year-old wooden house, so yeah, there are always things to be done. Now excuse me while I return to stripping the paint on the molding in the toilet so that I can repaint it. I'm a consultant. My mum described my job as talking to people about stuff. My girlfriend told me that I hang around with the guys all day and shoot the crap. It can't be that hard. I'm a construction worker for the union. My position requires climbing heights of more than 90 feet, scaling from walls in a body harness with about 80 pounds of tools attached to me. I'm consistently told that I just drive around all day, that it can't be that hard or tiring. I'm a fricking truck driver. I have to deal with every idiot they give a driver's license to. She said I just sit around and play on the computer looking at those pictures with the captions, which I'm a Redditor. They said that all I do is sit around waiting to push a button every 108 minutes. My dad hates that I don't work in some form of IT. He hates that I'm, quote, wasting my life away as a salesman. I run an award-winning business that has watched nearly all of its competitors shutter their doors in recent years while we've flourished. I've been flown around the country on trips, vacations, generally non-working trips, by my vendors for top shop awards, sales growth awards, etc. I have a long list of employees that return each year because they love working here, and a longer list of people who are dying to work here. Sales is only about 25% of my actual job. I love selling and jump on the floor when I can, but it's not that often. Since he likes to generalize my job so much, I refer to him as a repairman. He repairs computers, so he's a repairman. I've got two bosses. One is amazing and knows just how hard I do work. The other said I make things look pretty. I arrange all the merchandise in a party and crafts store with 2 sales floors, often relocating entire sections to allow for seasonal changeovers. When people ask me if I'm still a physiotherapist, they do that kind of massagey thing with their hands. No, you idiots, I'm not a massage therapist. It's not even close. If someone asks Mum, I'm the IT guy at college. Technically, my job is called AV, MM, and IT presenter. They butchered 3 jobs to build my job, so it's a jack of all trades. Hardware, software, lecturer, heck, anything with a plug sometimes. My mum still thinks I'm in IT. I lost my job after September 11th, and I've been working a desk job at a legal firm since 2003. I'm still behind a desk and still working with computers, so as far as she's concerned, I'm in IT. I'm a professional youth soccer coach and part-time referee. I can't tell you how often I get asked what my other real job is. I'm a graphic designer for 3 large clients, and my friend has always said my specialty is basically coloring. There are days I want to slap them. I work at McDonald's. Everyone thinks I just flip burgers for a living, which is false. The burgers are cooked on both sides at once and don't need to be flipped when they're cooking. Audio and video integrator here. I design systems for video conferencing and presentation systems for Fortune 500 companies. I also develop the software to control all of these systems, AMX and Crestron. My family thinks I sell TVs. I'm an MI analyst. Most people don't know what that is, so they just say, he messes around with computers, but if you need help with Excel formula, he'll do it for you. There was a project manager at my last job who said I was Neo from the Matrix because I could look at pages of code and instantly understand it. I thought that was pretty awesome. Even altered my SAS preferences to display green code on a black background, but it looked pretty horrendous, so I switched it back eventually. I have a BS in mathematics. My father always used to introduce me by saying, "This is my son, he's in school for math. He can count really, really high." When I was the head line cook in an 8-person kitchen, my dad wouldn't let me cook for the family at home because according to him, all I did at work was cook french fries. He refused to believe that any employer would ever put me in a position of authority over anyone else. When I stacked hay as a summer job in my younger years, I'd come home every night exhausted and my mother would angrily tell me that I shouldn't be tired because throwing grass, as she called it, was easy. Added to that, she convinced my dad I was on green herb, and that's why I was tired all the time. I'm a musician/audio engineer by trade, which really means I tootle around on Reddit all day. I mean, the narrator feels called out. I'm also technically an audio engineer who is on Reddit all day, but I'd like to point out that's rather specific for the job I do on this channel. But yeah, what this person's joking about is actually accurate for me. For centuries, men have grossly minimized domestic work, hence the term the invisible economy. I'm a professional musician. A lot of people think all I do is smoke green herb, do white snow, and drink a lot and then play a bit and party some more. But I don't smoke green herb at all. I get the opposite of job minimization. Half of my church thinks that Air Force Reserve Officer Training Corps means active duty Air Force service. No, Aunt Audrey, I'm not stationed anywhere yet. No, Pastor Ray, I don't have my AFSC yet. I have 1.5 years to go. About 2 months before I graduated college, I was able to snag a job at the company my dad owns, being the administrative assistant. Obviously, this is a bottom-rung position in the business world, but you have to start somewhere to move your way up. I got my foot in the door because my dad owns the company, but I was hired and I'm supervised by a different person completely. Getting this position was a huge accomplishment for me. I was at a party my friend had invited me to when I was asked what I do for a living by one of my friend's friends. I was finally excited to answer the question because I'd finally started a professional career, like not being a server or cashier. My friend, however, didn't even let me answer and instead interrupted me by saying, "Oh, she just works for her dad." I still feel upset by this comment she made. She completely undermined my accomplishment and my job. I've since moved my way up in my career and now do HR for the company. I may have gotten into the company because of my dad, but I worked my way to where I am because of me. My girlfriend said that my organic chemistry work was just drawing pretty pictures and arrows. I'm a senior network security engineer for a global firm. We have several federal sites. Security clearances, you know. One of my uncles told me to keep at it and someday you'll be making good money. My salary was 6 figures when he told me this. I'm earning a Bachelor of Fine Arts. He goes to trade school, said my dad. I mean, that's just wishful thinking on his part.
Patients of Reddit. What happened when a doctor or nurse accused you of faking it when you were actually in need of urgent medical care? My friend's dad went to the ER and the doctor said he was fine after minimal examination. Her dad insisted something was wrong and said he wouldn't leave until they ran some tests. As he was being escorted out by security, he had a brain aneurysm and died. Her family was awarded a pretty massive malpractice settlement, but they were absolutely devastated. I fell down a flight of stairs one time while working, hit a nail on the way down and ripped my forearm open and was bleeding a good bit. Adrenaline had me going long enough for my girlfriend, a nurse at another hospital, to drive me there. I had a bloody paper towel on my arm and all the security guards and nurses assumed I was a junkie that blew a vein. Finally, all the hype wore off, and I kind of passed out and woke up in a wheelchair in the exam room. I don't know exactly what happened, but my girlfriend was flipping out on the workers. She said half of them assumed I was on drugs, and the other half thought I was faking it to skip the line. I wasn't dying of blood loss or anything. I just got woozy when I actually was able to see the meat in my arm for the first time. They all just watched me as I fell to the floor and busted my head on the floor. Even then, they didn't do anything. My girlfriend, who's not even half my size as I'm not a small guy at all, had to pick me up and drag me into the wheelchair. Screw that hospital. Not as a patient, but as a parent of a patient. My wife and I started to suspect that something was wrong with our son starting at age 2. He would run around all day and was an active little guy but never sweat. He also never appeared to get cold. We live in New England and he would often take his shirt off before going to sleep even in the winter months. These concerns were dismissed as a toddlers are weird sort of thing by his doctor. We later noticed that he would stop and complain about his hands or feet hurting while playing or laying in bed. These were also dismissed. We were told that the pain in his feet could be because his feet are flat or because of growing pains. We were told that it could also be attention related. The doctor said that it's not uncommon for middle children to act out. This continued for 4 years. My sister is a biologist and asked us if we ever got him checked for Fabry disease. I flat out asked the doctor if he could be tested, and the doctor told us that there was no way this was Fabry, and they weren't going to test a kid without any genetic history of the disorder. The disorder is genetic, and without a classic sign, one that often doesn't show up until adulthood, if it shows up at all. We waited until our son was literally screaming in bed about how his hands and feet feeling like they were on fire. We demanded to get him tested, and he was diagnosed with Fabry. It's essentially a metabolic disorder caused by a missing enzyme. There are many issues associated with it, but the main one is extreme neuropathic pain in the hands and feet. The pain can be random, but with my son, it is normally because he overheated since he lacks the ability to sweat. He plays sports, so we have to be careful. Overactivity and fevers have to be watched out for since his body can't cool itself down. Pain can last anywhere from a couple of minutes to a couple of days. The average age of this diagnosis for this disorder is around 16, so it's not surprising that his doctor missed it. Most doctors do since it's a rare disorder. That was a little over a year ago, and my son is doing well now. There is no cure, but treatment allows him to live a relatively normal life with some added pain. I couldn't imagine making him wait until his teens to get any relief. I was in labor, and because it was my first, they acted like I had no idea what was happening and kept denying what I was insisting. I was over 2 months early and handled pain so well, they acted like it was just in my head, made me stand at the counter filling out paperwork while I insisted I needed to push. They decided to lay me down to check if I had even started dilating, and I promptly pushed them out. I was furious with how I was treated. I still am. My mother had a stroke at age 32. The doctors didn't diagnose it properly for over 24 hours because they were convinced her symptoms must have been related to drugs since she was in good health and so young. My dad apparently tried to tell them that she has no history of drug use, but they didn't believe him. Now, she's permanently disabled because of how long it took for her to receive proper treatment. Not me, but my best friend nearly died of a kidney infection that her doctor brushed off as period cramps. Not me, but my mother. She had called an ambulance because she had been experiencing chest pains, to which they basically told her she was crazy. About a month later, she passed away from a heart attack. When I was in labor, the hospital had my records wrong and showed I was due a month later. I was ticked, especially since I was in labor and in a lot of pain. The lady kept arguing until she realized I was in labor. She must have heard all the crap my boyfriend, now husband, were talking about her. Happened to my mom. They told her she was having an anxiety attack. She was having a heart attack. Was 12 years old and had a heart problem that was just starting to show. Arrhythmia and palpitations. Only happened when overexerting myself. Go to cardiologist and was accused of faking it to get out of chores and soccer practice. By the time I'm 15, my heart is absolutely unreliable throughout the day. During an attack, I would lose my sight and pass out. Same cardiologists still claimed I was faking it. Kids just don't have heart conditions. 16 years old and my heart finally stops. Luckily, I passed out earlier at school and was in the nurse's office when my heart stopped after another episode. Woke up in the hospital and, by the way, had a heart deformation that required surgery. My mother blew her lid, according to my doctor, of wanting to see me dead. Went to his office and threw his degrees and awards office wall at him and was screaming at him. Only reason she didn't sue was to prevent assault charges. Simple echocardiographs showed growth causing the electricity to pump my heart to go into circles. Wasn't fun having heart attack simulations nearly every day for 4 years. Before anyone asks, was poor and that cardiologist was the only one on my mother's insurance. To my doctor's credit, we both kind of had a laugh at this before the test results came back. I went to my primary because I had been experiencing hot flashes. Dr. Google couldn't tell me what was wrong, and I knew it didn't feel right. Well, at least we know it wasn't menopause, my doctor joked. I laughed. What 23-year-old woman spontaneously goes through menopause? This one. My doctor was very apologetic. I'm on hormone therapy now and doing fine. Luckily didn't end up with any crazy negative side effects, but could have if my doctor didn't run a full workup just to be safe. Changing it up just a little, my colleagues were convinced a girl was just faking a stomachache. She was about 16 years old and it was exam season, a time when we would get many sudden tummy aches, fits, etc., so I understood their skepticism, but something didn't sit right with me. I took her history myself and sent her for an emergency ultrasound of her abdomen, ectopic pregnancy. I was ready to rupture at any moment, so I shipped her over to OBS/GYN to get surgery ASAP. She came out just fine, but man oh man did I give my coworkers a hard time after that. Exam season or not, we need to be thorough. Had another time when it was just me and one other doctor working admission. She dismissed a case of a little girl faking fatigue for attention. Thankfully, I overheard her telling someone, so I went to double check. The poor girl was having a carpopedal spasm and was most definitely not faking her condition. Hooked her up to some calcium and sent her home with meds the next day. I'm not trying to make it sound like I'm perfect, but in our line of work, we must always be a little paranoid. I wouldn't really say they didn't believe that I was in pain, but didn't believe how much pain I was in. In February 2016, I started getting side cramps. I went to the ER, they said I had a tiny ovarian cyst. Okay, cool. I've had those before. In March 2016, I started my period and it continued until June. Between March and May, I went to at least 7 doctor's offices and ERs. I've had several ultrasounds and always had about 5 to 6 cysts spread between both of my ovaries. I was told I was too young. You're only 23, we don't want to take the cysts out because it could damage your ovaries, or you could lose one or both if something goes wrong, and what if you want to have kids one day? And on one instance, it's a Saturday and we don't feel like calling a surgeon in. I was calling off work or leaving early at least once a week. I always had a portable heating pad on and taking pretty heavy pain pills. In May 2016, I finally found a doctor who would do exploratory surgery on me. He pretty much opened me up, went, "Holy crap," and closed me back up. I then had to have a major surgery a couple weeks later because my left ovary had eaten the cysts and was attaching itself to my colon and artery in my leg. So I ended up losing my ovary anyway. I did throw a see you later ovulator party before my big surgery, which was a big hit. I'm trying to think of an after-while crocodile pun with the body part, but I'm drawing a blank. Any YouTube comments want to take a shot at it? Not my child, my brother. He was 11 and suddenly tired and lethargic. He missed a lot of school. He hated missing school. My mom kept taking him in, and they'd say it's the flu or puberty or mono, and it wouldn't ever get better. After a few weeks of this, my mom brought him to the hospital again and yelled at his doctors that something was seriously wrong with their son and they needed to do their jobs and figure out what it was. It was leukemia. They called the next morning just before 2 a.m. and said the test came back, your son needs to come in now. Not in the morning, right now. I can't imagine what happens to a parent in that moment when you know it's bad because they call you in at 2 a.m., but you don't know why. He was in treatment for just over a year and was re-diagnosed on his birthday. A few months later, he had a bone marrow transplant and was able to come home pretty quickly. There were complications from the transplant called graft versus host disease, like organ rejection, but the new cells try to reject you. It attacked his musculoskeletal system, causing stiffness in some dangerous situations. This October will be 8 years since the transplant, and he's cancer-free. That boy loves to use the cancer card now, but he's definitely earned the right. A doctor didn't believe me when I had a kidney stone that was too big to pass. He only changed his mind when another doctor checked me and started freaking out since I was getting super sick from the stuck stone. The doctor ended up getting fired from the hospital and my parents sued him. I wouldn't call it urgent medical care, but I was stuck in my room for about 5 hours on my bed with my head pressed into my shoulder because I had pinched a nerve. I had never had one before. I wasn't able to move my head at all, and when my mom got home from work, she called an ambulance for me. They carried me out in a sitting position and off to the hospital we went. When we got there, it took about a half hour for me to get into the hospital bed and ended up just giving up and leaving me sitting upright. The doctor pulled my mom out of the room and asked if I had a history of faking injuries in order to get painkillers, because I was pressing against the pain instead of leaning my head away from it. I had bronchitis, which turned into pneumonia, and when I went to the nurse, she sent me back to class because my fever was only 99. By the end of school, I made it home on the bus, but I had to go to the emergency room because I couldn't breathe. My lungs were filled with fluid. I was in 4th grade. I was out of school for 2 weeks, I think. When I was 16, I was in a really dark place, and one day I decided to confide to my doctor that I thought I might be depressed and see what he would recommend. Dude straight up laughed in my face and said, "You're not depressed, you're just a teenager." I told my mom I wanted to change doctors after that, and it took another year and tons of self-destructive behavior before I sought help again. Urgent a condition as the others, but it still manages to raise my blood pressure years later. Starting from when I was about 7, I would have terrible stomach pains, which my pediatrician claimed was attention-seeking behavior. He told my parents that they should punish me anytime I complained of stomach problems. My parents, who love yelling, jumped at a new reason to scream at me on a nearly daily basis. When I went to college, I was finally diagnosed as having a hiatal hernia, just like my grandparents, father, and aunt. When I was a kid, they even commented that I had the same symptoms they did, which for my pediatrician meant that I was just mimicking their complaints and didn't have the same condition. Because it had been untreated for so long, I now have to worry about Barrett's and esophageal cancer. Lucky me. New hearing doctor didn't believe that I needed hypoallergenic molds made and ended up making regular ones to try them out. Within a few days, my left ear was sore. It hurt a lot more than usual. Doctor and ear specialist thought it was just a little bit of irritation and that it would clear up quickly. It ended up being a major middle inner ear infection. Ruptured the eardrum, pus and blood everywhere on my pillow. About a month of agony, a lot of drugs, and a lot of specialists in the hospital. I was already very hard of hearing. That made me lose another 10 decibels permanently. This isn't so much a faking it situation, but more of my ex-girlfriend having to deal with a really incompetent security guard that hindered her getting medical help. My ex had a severe peanut allergy, and one time she ate a Thai chicken pizza in the college cafeteria that did not list peanuts as one of the ingredients. After her throat started burning, she knew something was wrong, so she grabbed a glass of milk, which I guess helped a bit, and went outside for some air because she was having trouble breathing. A security guard was passing outside in front of the building and saw that she might need some help. At this point, my ex was panicking and frantically looking through her bag for her EpiPen. The security guard asked what was wrong, and she tried to explain that she had a severe peanut allergy and needed to be taken to the hospital. When the security guard saw her take out the EpiPen, she took it from her and said that it was school policy that she be the one to do it. She then asked her to hold out her arm so she could inject her. My girlfriend could not believe that the security guard was trying to inject her arm like it was a flu shot, and out of frustration, she yanked it from the guard's hand and put it in her thigh, like you were supposed to, and sternly told her, "I need to get to a hospital now." When I was 9, I would get stomach aches when I went to school. My doctor insisted I was faking, but my mom insisted he take it seriously. Finally, they gave me a barium x-ray and saw I had a stomach ulcer. I had to take Malox and drink milk at every meal and snack. I even had to get special permission to get milk from the cafeteria at morning recess. My teacher ridiculed me for that. She was horrible and abusive. While I never received any of her physical abuse, there were 2 other boys in my class who got it on a regular basis. This would have been 1980, so it wasn't normal for teachers to be pulling hair or knocking a kid's face into a desk. Every day, the 3 of us would have to stay after school while she told us all how stupid we were. My stomach aches did not get better, and the doctor accused me of some combination of faking/exaggerating/non-compliance. We literally had to save all the empty Malox bottles to prove I was really taking my daily doses. Today we know that having me drink milk 6-7 times a day was exacerbating things, and in retrospect, my mom never really understood how stressful it was being in that class. It wasn't until the last few months of 4th grade when they finally transferred me to another classroom that I got well again. Later, my mom told me that even she thought I'd been exaggerating when I talked about how mean the teacher was. Because I left the honors class and moved down a level, my former teacher still ridiculed me pretty frequently when we crossed paths, but it didn't tie my stomach up in knots. I'm just going to read this comment here because I agree with it completely. What a vile excuse for a human being. I can't believe individuals like this get to have any authority over young children. So sorry that happened to you. Not me, but my mother. She had been very sick and tired. Imagine a cold, but it's 100 times worse. The doctor she saw multiple times kept basically blowing it off, saying she just needed some rest. It kept getting worse. One day, I was home with her. She was in bed sleeping and I was out in the living room watching TV. For some reason, she decided to walk out into the living room and sit in the chair across from the couch. She looked like a legit zombie, and when she sat down, she could barely hold her head up. I immediately called 911. Turned out she had pneumonia, and one of her lungs was entirely full of fluid, while the other was more than halfway. She spent a few days in the hospital and fully recovered. I don't know what made her decide to walk into the living room, but if she hadn't, then she would likely have died that day. All of that could have been avoided if the doctor she saw would have just paid closer attention to what was going on. I can barely remember this, but I was around the age of 11. I went for a sore throat, severe cough that would make me dry heave, phlegm, just the whole thing. Doctor says it's all in my head, despite me having an obviously inflamed throat and a very wet cough. I remember sitting there with my grandma who was like, I don't think it was in her head. I went back the same week and was diagnosed with walking pneumonia. I think that's when we switched doctors too. Not a doctor or nurse, but a bunch of camp counselors and the infirmary doc. I went to a sleepaway camp for children with cancer or anything chronic and or life-threatening. It's the second day and I wake up feeling a little bit sick with a sore throat. Okay, I'll just drink some water and I'll be okay. It's the summer after all. I can't get sick. Breakfast rolls around at 10 a.m. and I'm not hungry and my throat is getting worse. I tell one of my counselors that I'm not feeling good and he says, eat something, wait till after the morning activity. I couldn't bring myself to swallow, so I just sat there and then went to arts and crafts. I feel so sick at this point, I just sit in the corner of the arts and crafts room, literally fading in and out. I tell a different counselor and he says, drink some water. I do, it doesn't help at all. I realize that they're not going to do anything unless I make a big deal about it. I think to stand up and make an announcement. When I stand up, I immediately need to sit down again, and now my throat hurts too much to talk. I say, I don't feel good in my raspy, weak voice. He says, wait until after this activity. Lunch comes around at 12:30 and I go to the bathroom before sitting down and I look like a zombie in the bathroom mirror. I go back to my table and I say I can't eat. The counselors ask me why. I say, I feel sick. One of the counselors begrudgingly agrees to take me to the infirmary, which was a mini hospital because all the kids here have medical issues. I can barely walk, but I make it there, and promptly get sat down on an old wood bench and left alone as my counselor walks back to eat lunch. After about 15 minutes of waiting, a doctor pokes her head out of her office and asks me what's wrong. I tell her, I felt sick since I woke up. My throat hurts. She feels my forehead and says, you don't feel warm, but I'll get a thermometer. She comes back with a thermometer and puts it under my tongue. I had a fever of 102 and strep throat at a tightly packed dining hall surrounded by kids with compromised immune systems. I'm surprised I didn't get anyone sick, but the fact that it took 5 hours to get a chronically sick kid some freaking medical attention still makes my blood boil. I was bedridden for 3 days and missed literally everything I wanted to do while there. The worst part was, this was my last year before I got too old. I was losing my hair, my gums bled randomly, my skin looked like garbage, my muscles cramped up randomly, I literally fell over once while standing on my feet, I got horribly depressed, world felt like cardboard is the only way I can think to describe it, and all I wanted to do was eat and sleep. Sometimes I would start talking in conversation and get a word jumble midway through where words didn't come out right, which was the beginning of some social anxiety for me. I went to several doctors who plainly thought I was full of it. Several of them asked me how much I drank, and one of them asked me over and over again as if he didn't believe me when I said I didn't. I was tested for low thyroid, cancer, rheumatoid arthritis, and some other scary things, but nothing came up. This was over a 6-month period. I finally figured it out by Googling my symptoms, which led me to a message board that suggested I find a doctor who would give me a blood test for it so I would know for sure. Turns out I was really low on B12, somewhere in the low 300s I think. They went from nearly eye-rolling me to my face to giving me a B12 shot in the office before I left on my second visit and prescribing sublingual B12 to me. I actually found out a few years later that I have a gene mutation that keeps me from methylating B vitamins. I mention it to every new doctor I see now, and they always look at me like I'm a hypochondriac, then look it up on their laptop and kind of go, okay, like they're relieved I'm not full of crap. Not exactly accused of faking it, more so just disbelieved or taken lightly. I went into emergency at the hospital because it was Saturday for a medium-level abdominal pain that had been ongoing since the previous weekend. I'd been to the general practitioner on Wednesday or Thursday and had a blood test booked for the coming Tuesday, early as possible. However, my mom decided to take me in because of how long it lasted without change. At the hospital, I had a blood test taken and the doctor thought 50 milligrams of codeine would take care of my non-problem. It did nothing, so he gave another one and Panadol. He ended up believing it would work, but it sent everyone frantic when I ended up bent over, frothing at the mouth and coughing up blood. The blood test said pancreatitis. My brother had severe asthma, as in I'd wake up in the middle of the night to paramedics and an ambulance and only ask which grandparents I was going to wake up at. He had an asthma attack in school and his second grade teacher declared that he was faking it. Another teacher, Mrs. B, who was also friends with my mom, told her that he had a very well-documented history. Several medical journal articles written about him by this point with more to follow as he got older. He was definitely having an asthma attack and needed his inhaler and possibly several breathing treatments now. We kept several different inhalers at the school, but they had to be given by the nurse. The second grade teacher once again declared she knew what an asthma attack looked like and he was faking it. Mrs. B, the friend teacher, took him out of class immediately, tried the inhalers, and called our mom. He ended up staying in the hospital for several weeks and wasn't well enough to go to school for months. The school district not only had to pay for tutors to come to our house to help him keep up with classes, but also had to pay for his medical costs since mom was also a teacher. The second grade teacher tried to get Mrs. B in trouble for removing a student from her classroom without permission and almost got fired herself for causing the situation to get as bad as it did. Mom also was granted a transfer to our elementary school, which she had been trying to get for a while to help make sure my brother's health was okay, and she helped create an amazing, successful reading program there. The school district also implemented some changes that allowed kids with rescue inhalers to be able to keep them with them instead of with the nurse, as long as certain procedures were followed. The second grade teacher, on my brother's first day back to school, declared in a loud voice, "The next time, let me know if you need your inhalers." The overprotective big sister in me took over and loudly shouted back, "He did!" The school secretary gleefully told my mom it was the first time she had ever heard me talk above a whisper. Middle school teachers, what is the cringiest thing you've seen a student do? Director of Technology here. I don't really have much to do with the kids at the school I work at, but I definitely have a cringy moment. Called down to the middle school from my office to debug a problem for a teacher. The classrooms in this building all have two doors. One door opens into the building hallways, the other opens to the outside. My office is across a field from the middle school, so I decide to just cut across the field and enter the side door to the classroom instead of going all the way around the field and entering the classroom from the hallway. Bear in mind that these outside doors are almost never used by anyone except for an occasional fire drill. I open the door and step in to see a room full of students facing away from me and towards their teacher. The student closest to me scrambles to click X on her browser, but not before I see full-on, hardcore yaoi hentai. Did I mention I work at a Christian private school? She turns bright red, and with visibly trembling hands, she closes her laptop lid. I burst out laughing, which interrupted the class. The teacher looks to me in questioning confusion, and the students stare in silence. I casually walked over her and said, loudly enough for the classroom to hear, "Let's not look at memes and Facebook jokes at school, guys." Her flush-red face, contorted with fear, suddenly relaxed. Her trembling hands stilled. I laughed again and went and debugged the wireless access point issue I was called down for. No point getting her expelled over hormonal changes and curiosity. Valentine's Day, and a boy brings a girl a dozen roses. They were both in my homeroom, so I watched this all go down right in front of me. I had literally never seen these two have a conversation before either. Girl didn't know what to do with roses at 7 a.m., so she threw the roses in the trash can literally 20 seconds after it happened and went on her merry way. The boy never found out. We had this one kid in our 8th grade class stick his entire hand in a cake that was being passed around for a party, grab a chunk, and started eating it like a Neanderthal. It was chocolate and his face was covered. When he finished his chunk of cake with everyone looking in disgust, he then proceeded to lick every finger. It was torture watching. He also ended up being the kid that threatened to blow up the school at the end of the year. Oh my god. I had a kid carve his own name in his desk, but he couldn't figure out how we caught him. Strange, isn't it? Around the 8th grade dance season, they call it prom, there was a whole lot of cringiness roaming the halls. One popular tactic among the boys was explained to me. We ask the girl to prom, and then we run away so she can't say no. I caught the student on Google search attempting to look me up. He spelled my name wrong and my name is very common, so I wasn't worried. I sent him home since it was an after-school homework club, and then went through the rest of the history, which included boobs, naked women, Megan Fox nudes, and Megan Fox panties. One of the other students in the class kind of picked up on what was happening and mentioned that he has also been kicked out of the public library for similar reasons. A more innocent story, I was fixing the little girl next door's laptop. She shouldn't have a laptop, and her grandmother doesn't monitor anything she does because she doesn't know computers. I decided to peek in her computer history since she was 7 or 8 at the time. I was curious what kids her age did on the computer. Most of it was super spammy sites, but then I found a collection of how to prank call and what is Miley Cyrus's phone number? I was amused. There was always this kid that would go up to guys, shake their hands, and deeply sniff their necks. One day a teacher asked why he did this to guys, and all he said was, "If I did it to girls, it'd be weird." I once offered a boy a My Little Pony color by number sheet, ran out of Super Mario. The boy's response, "Mister, I'm not gay. I'm a lesbian. I like girls." I mean, to his credit, he's not wrong, but he is incorrect. I was demonstrating convection, which included burning some newspaper. One kid piped up with, that smells like incest." He meant incense. They were too young to get it, but I nearly died trying not to laugh. My husband teaches English at a middle school. He brought some creative writing assignments home to grade, and since I'm an assistant teacher for much younger humans, kindergarten, he drafted me into helping him sort through the mess and grade them. We've made good progress through the stack when I pick up a paper that had a kiss mark near the name in lipstick. Okay, that's odd, but I'm used to working with kids who are only just figuring out bathroom habits. A little lipstick on a report is hardly weird in my book, plus middle school. Then I see the name. Hun, who is R? Husband without missing a beat. R is this goth kid who looks like a rainbow threw up on him after having marathon screwing with a unicorn. I look back at the kiss mark. Glitter lipstick. Nice shade choice if the kid is going for goth pale. I read his creative writing assignment. I get up halfway through to go pour myself some more wine. It's an extremely well-written gay story featuring my husband and another teacher at the school. This kid is going places. I don't know what those places are, but he's going places. I had a student who would constantly butt into people's conversations, and when they asked him to mind his own business, he'd stand up and proclaim, "Nobody likes me! Everyone thinks I'm so annoying! Ha ha!" And he'd laugh while everyone awkwardly stared at him. Another kid literally told me one time that he would just act annoying so that he could impress a certain group of boys. They were not impressed. Well, at least that first kid is honest with himself. I had a 6th grader lick a book. He definitely tried to keep it on the DL, so he looked around, made sure no one was looking in his direction, and then licked the book. It was a tongue poke, then a full-out lick up the spine of the book. I had a classmate who had to give a presentation using PowerPoint. So there's a computer hooked up to a projector that is pointed at the screen that fills the wall. This guy sticks his USB with his presentation in the computer and it automatically loads the images he had on it in a gallery. He had a folder full of pictures of girls from his class he had downloaded from Facebook. That was kinda awkward. My mom is a middle school English teacher. Once, a student snuck a bar of soap into her class, ate it, and proceeded to run out of the classroom and start vomiting. Apparently, he did it to impress his friends. One of the kids responded to questions like Pikachu. Shame that a good kid is going to look back on those days with absolute horror. Not a student in particular, but a whole bunch of them. I was a substitute teacher for a few years on my university breaks, but last January was the worst middle school day I've ever had. 8th grade science class. I asked the kids to open their textbooks and work on the assignment. A girl shyly raises her hand and says, "Miss, there's something inappropriate in my book." Of course, some kid drew a member. I calmly tell her to erase it and move on. 3 more kids say the same thing. I say, "If you have something inappropriate in your book, please just erase it." Every kid starts whining about how there's members in their books. Since they won't shut up about it, I take the offending books and replace them with different books from the back of the room. Every single book had a huge member drawn in it. All 90-something of them. Crudely drawn members, artistic members, Squidward screwing SpongeBob, you name it, it was there. The kids rioted. I almost quit. I taught 4th grade last year, and I had a student who was 12 years old, middle school age, held back a few years. She always did very odd things to try to impress her classmates, but they were relatively tame. Until there was a line in the bathroom and she took her pants off, squatted over the trash can, and peed. 4 or 5 girls came running out of the bathroom and told on her. I once confiscated what I first thought was a note being passed in class, but turned out to be a gay fanfic one of my students wrote, pairing 2 of her classmates. Had an 8th grade girl pretend to pass out because she was upset. She got written up for screaming that another girl was a freaking jerk in the middle of a science lesson. Then got upset when that other girl didn't also get in trouble for looking at her wrong. In the dean's office, she was so quote-unquote upset that she pretended to faint, complete with back of the palm to the forehead and dramatic exhale, and then laid on the floor until we were forced to call an ambulance. Before the ambulance came, Mom walked in, she worked right across the street, and said, "Dang it, Jennifer, we're not doing this again." So evidently this was a regular happening around their house. At this point, the girl squinted her eyes open but refused to actually get up. When the squad got there, they checked her vitals and basically knew she was fine. They had to take her because we can't take chances with this stuff in schools. We all just kind of looked at each other and shrugged. So yeah, that was cringy. I will relay a short story that my 7th grade bio teacher told us. In that class, we dissected a cow eyeball. The year before us, a student pocketed the lens of the eye. Looks like a yellowish hard thing about the size of a peanut M&M. In his next class, he stood up and swallowed it in front of everyone. Another teacher told me about a student he had who would come to school in different costumes, ninja, soldier, etc., and stay in character the whole day. I do not remember the details, but there was an incident in which he threw throwing stars during a talent show. In 6th grade science class, our teacher asked if anyone knew what the arms of an octopus were called, and this kid immediately raised his hand and blurted out, "Testicles!" Everyone was laughing, including the teacher, who also snorted. His face was so red. Kid wore clothes to school with the price tag sticking out. When asked why, I was informed that this was to let everyone know he was wearing new clothes. I thought this was going to end with the kid having stolen them. I work for a private school. At this point, that's really all you have to say. This middle schooler recently started dating another one. The girl decided to come to school in a black leather miniskirt and black leather tank top combo. At recess, which I watched because it's a small school, she was dancing all around in front of her boyfriend and hanging off the fence a la stripper. It was hilarious and so cringy. One student wanted to ask me if I had a doppelganger. What he actually said was, "Do you have a dingleberry?" I also had a girl ask me what food stamps were, which isn't surprising because the district is very affluent. I explained, but she still seemed confused, so she asked what it means to, quote, blow a trucker for food stamps. Evidently, she was reading a book meant for a more mature audience, and her worldly knowledge hadn't caught up to her reading level yet. I organized an activity that was sort of like Never Have I Ever, but positive and meant to build empathy. Basically, a student would say, "You're in my boat if," and whatever they say that is the same as you have to stand up and find another chair. Great activity. One of the girls, who I often found puzzling because she just did and said things that were nonsensical, started her period and got blood all over multiple chairs. Some kids start looking at the seats and have no idea what's going on. The girls in the class figure it out but don't say anything. They just avoid said tainted chairs. The boys, however, are as dumb as a box of rocks and are touching it and sitting in the seats. I'm sitting there horrified since 1, that's disgusting, 2, I didn't initially know who was pulling a carry, and 3, how the heck do I nonchalantly stop the activity to get this biohazard cleaned up and no one really notices? After a short observation of the students, I noticed that the one girl was the unfortunate cause of all this. I told her that she was to do a favor for me, and I stepped outside. I asked her if she knew that she started her period, and she said yes. I sent her to the office and then went back in the room for damage control. I honestly don't know how I concocted a magical excuse, but I told all the kids that we were invited to go to the library for silent reading time, but had to go now because all the good squishy seats would be taken if they didn't hustle. They believed me and I sent them down there. A few girls stayed behind that figured out what happened, and I told them I knew and sent them as well. I finally got on the phone and informed the unfortunate janitor about the bloodbath in my room. This student spent an entire semester speaking in a Russian accent for an experiment. No one questioned him. First day back from winter break, he is back to talking normal. We were all incredibly confused, and his parents ended up going to the superintendent about our school allowing bullying. I teach history and let my students do a PowerPoint presentation on the history of anything. Some kid did the history of furries. He came to class wearing his fursuit. Honestly, kid's got guts. I respect him for that. I teach 8th grade. The student had talked to me previously in private about how the girl he liked was in my class the same period he was. He said that they had almost dated when they were both at their previous school before transferring to the one where I teach. On top of that, all the other students were aware that he had a major crush on this girl. So one day, he finished his classwork early and apparently he just couldn't take the hormones raging inside of him anymore. He blurts out, loud enough for everyone in class to hear, "Look, girl's name, are you gonna date me or what?" I pretend to work through this while cringing so hard on the inside. I see every other student in the room work through this, from shock to laughter to pure amazement and curiosity as to both why he would choose this moment and what on earth her response would be. The girl very politely said, "I'm just not looking for a relationship right now. Thanks for asking, though." Had a kid who legitimately believed he was a Sith, like from Star Wars. His helicopter mom would come flying down to the school crying religious discrimination if you told him otherwise. He would relax his throat and talk in a deep voice and say it was his real voice, but he disguised his voice to not scare his human brethren. On free dress days, he'd wear an all-denim outfit with high waters and denim vest over a denim shirt. I had him for science, so he blurted out things about alchemy from an anime he was into whenever we were working with the periodic table. He also had a girlfriend who lived in Mexico who was also his cousin. Humankind cannot gain anything without first giving something in return. To obtain, something of equal value must be lost. That is alchemy's first law of equivalent exchange. Not a teacher, but in 7th grade biology, we dissected rats, and the teacher warned that they might be juicy from preservatives. So I grabbed my dead rat, turned it over in the air, and shouted, "You gotta squeeze the pudding out of it!" My lab mate fainted as brown juices poured onto the table. I am now an adult biologist who does not do quite the same stuff. Scratch their butt with a ruler inside their pants and then put the ruler back into the container of rulers. Not a teacher, but I interned with one recently. Apart from the kid who insisted on being called Frisk, Undertale I guess, but the craze had died down so it was just weird. There was one girl who wore a cat ear headband. Kinda cute since they were the metal silhouette type that kids wear, but she paired it with a freaking cattail. A big, black and white, furry cattail. Not a teacher, but when I was in school, those track pants with snaps down the side were popular. The boys would try to yank the pants off each other during class changes, and they all wore basketball shorts underneath. One day, some guy thought it would be funny to rip off a girl's track pants, however, she didn't have shorts on. Bright purple undies on show, and the look of terror on that boy's face was hilarious. She just ran off, and a friend followed with her pants. Just finished my first year of teaching middle school. I had one particular student who did not view me as an authority and refused to work in my class. This was especially concerning because this student was placed in an advanced class and chose not to learn purely because of who the teacher was. This also meant that the student's classmates were well-behaved, gifted students. One day, while the whole class was completing an assignment, this student was not working. When I addressed the issue, the student threw a fit and started crawling around on the floor underneath the other students' desks. Now, I don't know when you've last been in a middle school classroom, but the floor is absolutely filthy. This student thoroughly embarrassed themselves, as was evident by the looks received from the other students. The whole situation was extremely awkward for everyone, especially when the student realized that they would get no support from the other students. Kid in a fedora offering high fives in the hallway, but then dabbing just before the other person's hand made contact. It was supposed to be a prank for a vlog. I had a couple of Markiplier fangirls a couple of years ago that just gave me the heebie-jeebies. A group of about 20 kids that run up and down the halls shouting about memes. One of which, when asked what he did over the weekend, started with, "So do you know the insert obscure meme?" While making Earth Day posters, one kid tried to disguise pot leaves as palm trees. There were several I love trees on it. Earth Day was on 4/22, so he also wrote the first 2 with a swirl at the end, so that it looked like he'd written 420, but it just looked like 4202. I probably should keep a list, but they happen so often that I don't think I'd ever be able to keep up with it. One of my mother's students took a whole pizza in the box out of our office and just started eating. When told to stop and put it back, he licked the rest of the pizza and asked if he could have it. She said no and told him to throw it away. He started arguing that it was better in his stomach than in the trash. My mom was furious. Not a teacher, but I had a classmate on a field trip rub mud all over his clothes and body so he could go home. Turns out his mom's car broke down and she couldn't pick him up. He had to wear his muddy clothes for the rest of the trip. My friend and I got busted on day 1 of 8th grade social studies passing a crude drawing of a classmate of ours getting pleasured by 2 well-endowed men wearing party hats. I didn't think the teacher looked at it until I got summoned to the office during next period. The principal unfolded the drawing and says to us, "Can you boys explain to me what this is?" I knew I was screwed. My friend reaches over the desk and grabs it, holds it close to his face like he's scrutinizing it, and says to the principal, "It looks like a picture of classmate being pleasured with 2 large men, and I think they're wearing party hats." I freaking lost it. My friend got expelled midway through that year for threatening to kill the principal during math class. What is it with these stories and taking such wild turns? I swear! Why can't middle schoolers just be normal for 5 minutes? Not a teacher, but an illiterate girl was doing a presentation on the country of Nigeria. Yeah, I think you guys can guess how she pronounced it. Not a teacher, sorry to be that person. In middle school, my friends and I were not in the popular crowd, but one of my friends had a huge crush on the most popular boy in school who was also a major jerk. So one day, she brought him a bouquet of flowers and a heart-shaped box of chocolates. She brought the gift to him before school where he and his crappy friends hung out and asked him to be her boyfriend. I happened to be nearby and witnessed the whole thing. They laughed and laughed at her until she ran away crying. Despite riding the same bus as her, I never saw her again that school year. I saw her that summer since she lived nearby, and she told me she transferred schools because of the incident. Poor girl was brave enough to give it a shot, just to be literally laughed out of the school. I taught 5th grade recorder class as part of general music, so every kid had to play them for a quarter. It was freaking awful. 15 to 20 kids, half of whom were budding criminals, playing out of tune on plastic recorders. I was in the middle of chewing them out yet again, when I heard what sounded like a sneeze combined with a squeak. I look over, and the dumpiest, runkiest boy in the class, the gross kid, if you will, had sneezed with this recorder in his mouth and proceeded to blow clear snot through it and onto his fingers. He sat there for like 15 seconds dumbfounded, with that orange clear plastic recorder just hanging out of his mouth. Finally, I told him to just put it on the table. A few minutes later, I accidentally knocked it on the floor, and it broke, justifying my throwing it away after class. I bought a new one at the 99-cent store because I was not giving that stupid thing to anyone else. Not a teacher, but was a student. One of my classmates had a history presentation. He screamed at the top of his lungs, "Leroy Jenkins!" Nobody had any freaking clue what that meant. Everyone was staring at him while he was just smiling, scanning the room, and slowly started to realize no one knew what he said. His smile quickly went away, and he began his presentation. 2 8th grade boys invented their own language which involved anime-like giggling. Funny thing, these two were jocks with decent social status. We had so many parent meetings about how their son's giggling was disruptive in class. The parents were mortified, but the boys wouldn't stop. I was showing a movie once, and this girl and boy were sitting in the back next to each other in a table where 2 people could sit. Anyways, by the middle of the movie, I see the kid has his 2 hands on the table and he is looking away with his eyes wide open while the girl has her hands under the table and is slightly moving. I knew right there and then she was rubbing him. I went discreetly and stood behind them just to confirm, and yes, she was. When I tapped her on the shoulder, I guess it was the adrenaline, he finished, in her hands. The 2 students in front of them saw everything happen. There were news for about 2 weeks and the entire school knew. They're in high school now and still dating. A rare happy ending for this. I'm a male teacher. I once confiscated a note being passed between 6th grade girls. It turned out it was a list, and they ranked all the boys in the grade in terms of attractiveness. I didn't really look at it, but later I showed it to my team, and they pointed out that my name was number 4 on the list. When I was in middle school, we had this dress as an animal day, and all the other kids did stuff like wear a raccoon hat or cat ears, but I was different. I decided to go in a skin-tight How to Tame Your Dragon costume, and the worst part about it was that the yearbook committee dedicated an entire freaking page to me in that crappy costume. I was a volunteer lifeguard at a middle school gym for part of the year. This school also has a swimming month in the gym classes, where students must wear bathing suits bought or ordered via financial aid at the uniform store. There was a highly overweight girl in one of the classes, and she didn't seem to be aware of the standard issue bathing suits. The gym teacher sent home reminders the week before, but I guess she forgot. This girl was picked on a lot in general and always kept to herself. She was very shy. She never spoke. If you called on her to answer a question in front of the class, she would get teary. On the first day, the other students showed up wearing the uniform bathing suits, but she was wearing her bathing suit from home. It also wasn't a particularly pretty bathing suit, as it looked very old lady-ish and had a bright orange Hawaiian shirt type of pattern. She stuck out, which you could see in her body language really bothered her. The gym teacher ended up calling her out in front of the whole class, giving her a lecture, and giving her a detention for not wearing her uniform, because that was the rule. Her face turned bright red, and she just stood there silently while other kids stared at her and giggled. You could tell that she wanted to cry, and that her soul had just crumbled. The lecture went on for a very long time. This was a gym teacher who didn't like it when the students disobeyed the rules. I was sitting off to the side, wringing my hands and bouncing my knee in secondhand embarrassment. I wish she had just read the reminder. Poor sweet child. Always read the reminders. Let's hear the other side. Guys of Reddit, what's the creepiest thing a girl has ever said to you? I remember one time this one girl who was oddly talkative in my options and fixed income class kept talking and asking me about my personal life. Then, when she added me as a Facebook friend, there was a message with it that said, "Found you, smiley face." Pretty uncomfortable. I was talking to a girl on the phone who at the time was messed up on painkillers and started relating to me a story about how when she was 7, she pushed a girl into a pool and watched her drown. Her grandma came home, found out about it, and told her to tell the police it was an accident. That should have been a warning sign right there. I kept some of your hair. 20-year high school reunion. Copied from an email I received from a stalker 7 years ago. When you and her have your baby, rest assured, I'll be the one that raises it. Haha, no! When I was about 17 years old, I worked at a cafeteria and some girls, 11 and 13, were chasing me for weeks. They even waited in front of my door when I had to go to work to chase me all the way up there. One day I was working and the cafeteria was full with people when the 11-year-old girl said, "When can I give you head?" Everyone instantly looked at me. Uncomfortable isn't even the right word to describe my feelings at that moment. Ugh, I thought I had nothing to contribute until you reminded me. Back in middle school when I was maybe 13 or so, I used to go to a pretty large school, roughly grades 5 to 12, all in the same interconnected complex of buildings. That meant there was always a huge number of students milling around the place during lunch break, and since it was a quite large area, you were often surrounded by strangers. Anyway, at one point I heard through the grapevine, which, as a social outcast, was nothing I was terribly familiar with, that this girl a grade or two below me liked me. Being socially inept, I just checked if the girl was pretty, noticed she wasn't, and ignored the whole thing. Well, the girl didn't take being ignored for long. She got her cousin, who was more or less the bully of my grade, to pay me a visit with his cronies, pick me, and carry me to go see her one lunch period. They literally half-dragged, half-carried me across the whole school complex to see this girl, and held me there while we talked. Imagine your worst early teen conversation where one party is shyly talking to her crush, and the other is awkwardly trying to put her off, all while being physically restrained and watched by bullies. I suppose this doesn't really compare to the trauma of being propositioned by an 11-year-old when you're 17, but oh man was it awkward. Sadly, subsequent girls have been far less forward. Making out with the girl I was seeing, lightly slide my hand up her chest, and as my hand is going to caress her neck, she grabs it around her neck and forces me to choke her, which is fine. She then proceeded to call out her brother's name, which I assume was less fine. This happened to a friend of mine I was living with. I won't go into it, but the situation we were in demanded we shared a bunk bed. We had a rule that we could bring girls home so long as we kept the noise down. One night, while sleeping, my friend brings this girl home with him. I woke up to them coming in as they went up to his bunk to start messing around. I hear the typical stuff at first. Lip smacks, heavy breathing, some moaning. Then it happened. I hear the girl whisper to my friend the words, "Are you down with the funk?" In retrospect, my friend says he said yes because the chick was hot and he didn't want to ruin the night. So he says, "Yeah, baby, I'm down with the funk for sure." Almost immediately, the girl takes off her panties, stands up on the bunk, turns around, squats, and takes a dump. Right on his chest. Luckily for him, it wasn't the messy sort, but as you can imagine, the guy lost his crap. No pun intended. He tossed her off the bunk and started screaming for a girl to get the heck out of his house. Meanwhile, I'm on the bottom bunk laughing my butt off. So, not really the creepiest thing a woman's ever said, but now you know what the funk is. This has ruined my perception of funk music forever. I was over at her dorm room, and after we got done with our business, I spotted a bottle of my cologne on her desk. I asked her about it, and she said she sprayed it around to make her room smell like me. Okay. Next week, she gets into my car, makes a big sound, and says, "Oh, smells like you in here." She started rubbing herself. No joke. En route to Kroger. Okay. Few weeks later, at her dorm room, I decide to get a little nosy. I find the following. 1. Aforementioned bottle of cologne. 2. 2 pairs of my dirty undies, not left by me. 3. Pair of my dirty socks, again, not left by me. And this freaked me out more than anything for some reason. Number 4. Envelope with what I can only assume to be, drumroll, my body hair in it. Not okay. I break up with her over ICQ, the good old days. She informs me that she left a bag in my apartment. It's under my bed. In said bag is a bunch of completely random crap with Kmart tags still on it. It was obviously a plant meant to force us to have an awkward post-breakup makeup reunion. Nay, says I. Got my army buddy to drive me over to her dorm in his Ford Festiva. I saw her on the curb waiting, crying. I launched that bag out the window and we took off as fast as that Festiva would go. Never did see if the bag hit her, but given its trajectory, it's highly likely. For those who will want to know, the cologne I was wearing was Old Spice. I was dating a girl called Allison. My grandma is also called Allison. I had mentioned that I found it a little weird that they had the same name, so once as we were screwing, she asked, "Does this make you think of your grandma?" It didn't. Until then. I once went to a ski resort where people of different nationalities were there. A young Chinese girl introduced herself to me the day I was leaving and asked for my number, so I gave it to her. She called me about a week later and asked me if I wanted to go over to her place for a dinner party. I thought to myself, sure, why not? So I turn up with some booze and find about 24 young Chinese girls and no guys. None of the girls spoke any English except the girl who invited me. They sat me down at the end of the table, spoke in Chinese all night while looking in my direction and giggled all the way through. I had no idea what they were saying. At the end of the night, the hostess asked me if I would be so kind to pose for individual photos with each one of them separately. I hesitated, but went along with it. They giggled hysterically throughout, and still only spoke Chinese. No idea what the heck that was all about, but I got seriously creeped out. Edit. No banging involved, those girls were young. I'm a regular guy. Only thing I can think of is they thought maybe I looked like someone famous, though I don't think I do. Okay, some people are making a big thing about the booze thing. In Australia, it's traditional to bring some wine when invited to a dinner party. Also here, the legal drinking age is 18. The girl I met was no younger than 18, I thought, so it was all cool. I was in my mid-20s then, so by young, I meant they were too young for me, though technically it would have been perfectly legal. I'm no predator, I just like girls to be around my age, but not younger by a huge margin. Also, the hostess told me none of them ever drank alcohol, which made me think that they were slightly on the innocent side. Unrelated, but I can't even read half of these because they're so messed up. For example, a girl I hadn't even dated carved my initials into her ankle. She received no wahoo. Had a girl request me to break into her apartment, make her hot chocolate in her kitchen while she's scared in her bedroom, and then come in and bang her. You know this was all just a ruse to get you to make her a hot chocolate, right? I had a girl I once kissed at a party proceed to send me pictures of her crying, half naked, and makeup smeared all over her face Joker style. She won't stop calling me or sending random pictures of herself with distressed or angry face. This has been going on for 3 months now. This is a toss-up between look at these before showing me hundreds of bits of paper the girl had written my name on over and over again when we'd been out once, or the time I woke up from a lovely wahoo dream to find my girlfriend gripping my member and asking me over and over again, "Who do you think I am?" Do you want all your stuff back? After we broke up, I had not given her anything. She had stolen it all over time. She had it couriered to me. We then ended up having pillow talk a few months later over email. I found out later that it was her sister mailing. And this stuff she sent back was a photo album entirely filled with pictures of me sleeping. Good times. I had to borrow a girl's computer once for a group project in college. I got to the group meeting and there was a password. I called her and after 10 minutes, she finally gave me the password, which was her first name and my last name. Okay, but low-key, that's kind of sweet.
Your lips looked dry while you were sleeping, so I licked them for you.
Wife and I were in town with our son, visiting my parents when an old high school friend, she was only ever a friend, came by to meet my wife and 2-year-old son. After we all sat and talked for a few hours, and what after felt like a pretty normal night of company, we all got up to say goodnight and the friend hugged my wife goodbye, then turned to me, grasped me very firmly into a hug, kissed me on the lips, then whispered into my ear, "Your son should have been ours. I love you," then turned around like it was totally normal and waved goodbye to us and left. My wife didn't see or hear any of it, and I never told her. She thinks the girl is a decent person and will never see her again. I love you with all of my heart. Let's run away and get married. Not creepy yet? I was 12. She was 42. Not directly to me, but a friend of mine's mom referred to me as a tasty little snack when I was 15. And no, she was not a MILF. Not even close. I went to a football game with this girl. Afterwards, I went to meet her dad, which was already kind of weird. He said to her, "Is this the boy you've been talking about for the past 3 months?" I had known the girl for 4 days. So I did this chick that lived near me, only a few times over a few days. She got really attached to the point of freaky, so I backed off. Within a month, she was at a mental institution. 2 weeks after that, she gets back and happens to be sitting with her mom outside when I got home from work, so I could either ignore her completely or interact. I greeted them nicely and asked how she was, not mentioning where she just was. She stared at me for like a minute straight with the most blank, creepy face I've ever seen, and finally said something.
Are you the one that was controlling my mind?
Nope. I can poop bigger than you can, as she began dropping her pants. To be fair, we were only 3 or 4 years old at the time behind my parents' garage. And though I lost that contest, I married her years later and have since upped my game. I was literally almost inside of this girl and some intimate talk is going on, and she whispers, "You know why I've always liked you?" I asked why, and she said, "You remind me of my dad." I still banged her, but I didn't call her for a while after that. Girl I had slept with 2 times, without knowing her or her friends. We were neighbors. "My friends saw you at Bar X on Saturday. I thought you said you weren't going out." How did they know it was me? I never met any of your friends. They've seen pictures. Pictures of what? Of you sleeping. Did anybody else get reminded of that overly attached girlfriend meme from like 12 years ago, or was that just me? In a big group of people. "Could I have some vodka? You've had way too much." "I'll give you head for some vodka." "I'm good." "I'll do it anyway." She told me she wanted to be the father of our children. Let that sink in for a bit. This one's a bit of a long one, and it's kind of gross, so just a fair warning. I'm 20. A pretty sort of rock and roll 24-year-old girl asks me out at the spring this past summer. I say yes. We have a decent date. She says she's leaving the next morning for New York City for a month's time. I figure this means she wants purely to use me for Wahoo because she asked me to come over at 12:30 at night and has been out drinking with friends. I say yes. She comes over. We have fun. She was uncoordinated and spoke atrocities while we did this awfully clumsy mushing. The worst I've ever experienced, blame on her behalf. After, I expect her to believe because she's verbalized that she has a flight at 10 a.m., but no, she lingers. For hours. Until well past 5 a.m. I can't bring myself to hint that she should leave, so I go with it. Lying naked next to me, breaking a long silence of hours in which I've fallen asleep, she wakes me and says, "When I was 12 to 15 years old, demons would try and enter my spirit, my soul, late at night while I slept. It wasn't sleep paralysis. I know so." You can imagine the terror as my eyes grew wide and I grew rigid, staring at the ceiling above me in the blackened room. She continues, "They succeeded once, and I became possessed. I couldn't control myself. I started hurting myself and becoming intimately violent. Sometimes, I think they're coming back for me. I want you to hurt me so they can't." I had to kindly show her out after explaining that I was growing much too uncomfortable. The worst part, I wake up the next morning and expect the protection we had used, now lying on the floor, as I pick it up to trash it. Part of why our intimacy felt strange was that there was some texture I felt unfamiliar. Blood. Blood everywhere. It had just been overlooked the night prior due to my bedspread being all black. Man, the blood. So, a girl had a crush on me. One morning when I came home to my place, there was a bag hanging on my front door. I bring it inside and see what's in it. I find a new set of pencils. There was also a spoon that you used to feed babies along with a bottle of baby food. A tiny pink hair clip I'd imagine a 9-year-old girl might wear. A 3-page letter telling me the letter was written by a Polish girl who just moved into town. She called herself Tatiana Dongchert. I think it's Polish, I'm not entirely sure. And she wanted to meet new people in town. So she asked if I wished to bake Doppler cookies with her down by an abandoned warehouse at the docks. Yes, that is what she wrote. Then, as the letter progressed, the text looked more and more as if someone wrote it while driving a bike. At the end of the letter, it was more like random words. Later that same week, someone tried to open my door in the middle of the night. Then another week passes, and I get a visit at 5 in the morning from some staff from a home nearby where she apparently lived. They told me they found her sleeping in my bushes and that she had run away every night for the last 2 weeks and that she was very ill at the time. They gave me a number to call in case of an emergency. I did not sleep well that following month. Hold on, stop. That's my husband calling. The husband that she said she divorced from who was overseas in Iraq. She wanted me to wait in silence until after the phone call to get right back at it. Stood by the door the whole time, too, to make sure I didn't leave. Nope. Special Cambodian spice. It didn't sound creepy at the time, but I'd asked my wife of 25 years what the unusual black seasoning on the meal she'd just given me was. Turned out, it was a pharmaceutical in the class of beta blockers. By pure luck, I ate only maybe 1/10 the amount present rather than all of it. An hour later, I nearly died. Weak and intermittent heartbeat. A few months before she'd got me to take out life insurance. Beta blockers in more than tiny amounts stop the heart. Looks like a natural heart attack. She's Cambodian, by the way. Yeah, because I was really wondering about the veracity of your statement regarding her status as Cambodian when I'm more concerned about the fact she nearly killed you, dude! My first girlfriend, read-only girlfriend, found me packing my stuff to get the heck out and pulled a sword on me, like a real katana. Said if I packed another freaking thing, she would cut off my head and keep it in a jar. I very carefully explained that I was just moving things, all was well. I hugged the psycho, then left in the dead of night and spent the rest of the night at the train station till I could get the heck out of Dodge. For the next 6 months, she sent me nightly messages on various websites accusing me of being a demon and attacking her while she slept in the dream world, and I should be careful because she was going to fight back with witchcraft. Then, she recruited other crazies, and they were saying the same crap. There was this army of her and a bunch of underage girls, one of which was apparently my then 23-year-old ex-girlfriend's new true love, waging internet war on me for being an evil dream demon and trying to take over the dream world. Since then, yeah, pretty much double rainbow gay. Dudes aren't freaking insane, and when they are, you can tell pretty easily. I found half a bag of toenail clippings in her closet, and when I confronted her about it, she said, "Yeah, I like to save them for later when I want a midnight snack." I got the heck out of there, needless to say. Over at the apartment of some girl I knew from wherever, and basically there to just have wahoo. Just going through the formalities of acting like we're not. She pulls out a photo album. First and ever page, a miscarried baby, dressed up in a bonnet on a silk pillow. I actually found it reassuring that the pictures weren't just thrown in with our other family photos. 4th of July at Uncle Ted's, Labor Day, dead baby, dead baby, dead baby, Thanksgiving, dead baby's first Halloween, Catwoman of course, Christmas after that crazy blizzard on Mount Hood, dead baby, ooh, ski trip. Ex-girlfriend of almost a year, who I thought had moved away, bombarded me at work one day and said, "Look what I did for you. Will you take me back now?" She had the Chinese characters for I love you and my initials tattooed on her arm. I would have to say when a girl I barely knew figured out my class schedule, she would leave me letters in sealed envelopes, giving them to my teachers to give to me. This one time, me and this girl who seemed interesting enough had a conversation. "If you'd have to kill me, how would you do it?" What? Do I really have to answer? Yes, I need to know. Well, I'd Probably shoot you, something quick and painless. Aw, why not just stab me into the stomach with a rusty knife? Abandon ship! Abandon all hope, ye who enter! I had a girl open with a necrophilia joke. That's how far she got all night. Just a quick heads up, exploitation of minors in this one. This will probably get buried, but I knew a girl in high school that was pretty sought after. She was small, blonde, busty, and had a killer smile. She loved gaming, anime, sweet tea, boiled peanuts, the whole shebang. I never bothered flirting with her or anything because she just always had so many guys practically tripping over one another to talk to her or sit next to her at lunch. We had computer and geometry class together and sat right next to each other through assigned seating, so we got to talking here and there and had a lot of laughs. We started enjoying it so much that we started writing each other notes back and forth in class, then entire letters throughout the whole day. Then she started inviting me over to stay the night. Her parents were okay with it, and they never came to check on us or anything. I got the impression that I was not the first boy she brought home, so of course we had Wahoo, and I lost my virginity that night. Things are going smoothly over the next couple weeks, and she starts stepping it up on the kinky meter. First she admits that she thinks threesomes are interesting. Okay. Then she says she likes furries. Alright. Then that she likes older and younger men. I don't even know what the heck that means, but this girl is letting me sleep with her on a regular basis, so I don't care. Then the letters she starts writing me in class get really graphic, asking questions like what would I do if my dad walked in on us doing it, and if he would join, or if I would come to her house after school and pee on her in her bathtub. At this point, I put a lot of space between us, and a couple of days later, she confesses to me that she cheated on me in a threesome with 2 older men. She was really broken up about it, but I saw it as a get-out-of-jail-free card. A year later, she starts dating a friend of mine who was only 15. Keep in mind, she was about 20. I warned him that she was a bit loose in the head, but being 15 and with the busty blonde, he didn't care either. Past time forward again, I go to hang out with them at his house. Turns out she's pregnant and they're hiding it as best they can. Things come to a head when his parents find out. Cops get called. They find pictures of them banging together, which was exploitation of a minor. So they raid her house. They find that her parents are drug dealers and an immense amount of CP on her computer, some that include herself when she was younger. Turns out, her mother used to make the videos of her sleeping with older men and would sell them. Needless to say, she's in jail now and there is an ongoing custody fight. TLDR, lost my virginity to a cheese pizza actress. Got stalked by a crazy. Followed our band around for a while, but I wasn't interested as I had my eye on someone else at the time. I was playing a gig at a pub, she walked in, took off her clothes in front of the stage, took a knife out of her handbag, declared her eternal love while touching herself, and threatened to kill any woman that went near me. I'd never spoken to her or anything else before. The police eventually took her away, but I was reminded of my grandfather's advice at the time. If you're gonna date a woman, date the one that irritates you the least and never, ever date crazy. Good advice, but what if you'd never spoken to her before or shown any interest? The woman had a history of mental issues stemming from a brutal childhood. She was committed to long-term care, and it turned out she had a thing for musicians, as other fellows I knew had the same experience with her at various venues. Stunning-looking woman, but not playing with the full deck at the time. I hope she's got herself sorted out since then. Not to me, but here's the deal. This happened not very long ago to a friend. He tried online dating, and some cute girl messaged him to hang out one night. Verified her, and she looked the real deal. Gets to her place, and she's dressed up to go clubbing with another friend of hers who's on the computer. As he walks in, her friend yells, "Oh my god, I got another one! We're at 6!" My friend raises an eyebrow but hangs out for a bit. They start chatting and drinking, all is good. And then, by surprise, like 4 other guys show up minutes apart. She walks to where they are and says, "We only need 2 more," or something like that. At this point, my friend is freaked out and asks what the heck is going on. Turns out these girls were deciding to invite all the tall guys on the site and then making them compete for their attention in person. Game show type environment. TLDR, some girls on a dating website invite a whole bunch of guys to their place and play "I only want the best, the rest can leave." Now that's creepy. Make-A-Wish recipients and workers. What were some wishes you had to say no to? Make-A-Wish wish granter here, and I have to say it is the ultimate sadness when we have to stop the process because a non-custodial parent won't sign the paperwork. It's happened far too often. Usually the wishes we had to say no to were from the kids' family members. There was always some uncle, grandma, cousin, sibling, or parent who wanted to hijack the kid's wish. A classmate of mine, now passed, got a meet and greet with Sammy Sosa. The understanding from the Make-A-Wish people was that Sammy would sign autographs and sit with the family for a while. Now, this kid was all about Sammy. He had his jerseys, loved Sammy's little leaps after home runs, and if I recall correctly, even was big into Pepsi because of Sammy too. When the day came, Sammy showed up late. He didn't respond when the family greeted him. It was described as a sullen silence. Signed a glove and then walked away. My classmates started crying once it was clear Sammy was not going to come back. Right when the parents were about to leave, another baseball player named Corey Patterson saw my classmate, came up, signed everything they had, and talked and joked around with the family for over a half hour. Corey became my classmate's favorite player that day, and I think he lived perhaps a year after that moment. At his funeral, my classmate's picture with Corey was one of the prominent pictures. That moment and day truly, truly meant the world to him. He was around 10 to 11, if I recall correctly. To this day, I'm unsure if someone from Make-A-Wish found Corey or if the moment was as spontaneous as it was described to me, but no matter what, Corey will always have a special place in my heart because of that story. I, of course, was not there, and I'm not a primary source for Sammy's interactions with my classmate, but I know and trust the family. One thing that a couple of Anons have pointed out that I think is worth mentioning is that it seems unlikely that Make-A-Wish would organize a meet and greet with Sammy Sosa, gently suggesting I was misremembering the context. The Anons argued that it's more likely their meet and greet would be with the Cubs team as a whole, and that this changes the context of Sammy's actions if the meet and greet wasn't directly with him. What I do remember is that this story really rocked our tight-knit community, but made us that much more appreciative of Corey Patterson. My little brother has had 2 heart transplants so far, and will probably get another one before it's all said and done. His wish was to go to Nintendo. Well, Nintendo Japan doesn't grant wishes, but Nintendo of America does. He stayed in Seattle for a few days and had a day-long tour of Nintendo. Unfortunately, Reggie wasn't in the office that day, but the Treehouse staff led him around all day. This was right before the Switch came out, so we got to play Breath of the Wild before anyone. They gave him a sweet goodie bag and let him go on a shopping spree in the employee store. I received a wish when I was 15. At the time, I was madly in love with Harry Styles and of course wanted to use my wish to meet him and spend the day with him. After telling the wish coordinator this, she broke the news to me that if I were to meet him, it will be a year from then, with about 15 other kids for a very brief moment, a hello and a photo. Upon hearing that disappointing news, I changed my wish and instead went to Australia for 10 days with my family and swam in the Great Barrier Reef. Just for some background, both my sister and I are pretty dang sick, and so we had the rare occasion where we both got wishes. My family suggested that we just do one, but Make-A-Wish was adamant that we each got our own. My sister's Make-A-Wish was to meet Taylor Swift. We flew to Nebraska for 2 days, got in the same meet and greet line as people who won radio contests, took a picture with Taylor Swift, and that was that. I, on the other hand, asked to meet Christopher Nolan. He had never been requested for a wish, so we were flown to LA where we got a tour of the Warner Brothers lot and then had a private lunch with Nolan and Emma Thomas, his wife. We hung out for 2 hours where they finally left because they had some film-related thing to do. We found out later that he'd only agreed to an hour, but during the lunch insisted that he stayed longer. It was quite interesting how we both had celebrity wishes and they both turned out so differently. I asked for a shotgun because I was into clay shooting. They said no. Went for a rally driving day. They picked my family and I up in a limo. Drove us 2 hours to the place, and then I had the whole place to myself and lots of time behind the wheel. It was great. They paid for pro pictures and a meal after for my family and my godparents' family. Even just gave me some spending money. I had a great time. 10 years later, still alive. And hopefully have that shotgun? This isn't my personal story, but one of my uncle who passed away shortly after I was born. He loved the Terminator so much that he wanted nothing more than to meet Arnold Schwarzenegger. Due to having a busy schedule, Arnold's agent had to deny him of his wish a couple of times, was filming for the second Terminator. My uncle was so determined to meet Arnold that he then changed his wish to meeting Maria Shriver, Arnold's wife. Because of his determination, he was allowed on set of Terminator 2 Judgment Day. He got to meet Arnold, Maria, and Arnold's stunt double. My mom still has the pictures and it makes my heart soar. Make-A-Wish is fantastic and I'm so glad my uncle got to live out his dream. My condition prevented international travel, so even though my top wishes were to go to Japan or to the UK to meet J.K. Rowling, those were denied. I ended up doing a shopping spree at Mall of America, which sounds kind of lame, but I grew up poor and had a lot of fun being able to just buy things for myself without worrying. First thing I bought was a new pair of glasses, since my old ones were scratched to crap and too weak anyway. When I was in college, I had a good friend named John. We were both in automotive 8 hours a day for 2 years. One day, we grabbed sushi on lunch, and he casually mentioned at 12 years old, current age 20, he was a recipient of Make-A-Wish. He asked for sushi and just sushi. You could see his eyes light up just telling the story. They set him up with a private lunch at a local sushi bar where he had the entire selection of sushi rolls laid out in front of him with each and every possible condiment, roll, and side. Not an expensive or grandeur request, but Make-A-Wish went above and beyond. I've been the recipient, and later on after my health improved, I volunteered as a wish coordinator. My original wish was to attend the Oscars. That got denied by the Academy as they do not grant wishes. I wound up going to the People's Choice Awards as a VIP. Make-A-Wish flew my family to LA for a week, all expenses paid. They got us a limo for the show, paid for my dress, hair, and makeup, we walked the red carpet, and were seated very close to the stage. It was a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The generosity of the volunteers is remarkable. They even had someone greet us at the airport on arrival. It was extremely important to me that my brother and sister were included in my wish because my illness had robbed them of part of their childhoods. I am forever indebted to everyone who made my wish possible. When I turned 18, I decided to volunteer as a wish coordinator to give back to an organization that did so much for me. I met with wish kids and their families. We would always arrive with a gift for all of the children of the family based on a little survey they filled out. We'd talk with the child and help define their wish. It's important to determine the child's true wish and make sure that it isn't influenced by parents. The most common wish is to go to Disney. Celebrity meet and greets are the ones that often can be turned down. First, because it's undefined what a meet and greet is. It could be the child literally waving at someone and no one wants that. And second, because not all celebrities grant wishes or can schedule time to meet wish kids. The coolest wish I worked on was a shopping spree for a boy who was confined to his room. He got $7,000 to go buy video games, TVs, a tricked out lazy boy, etc. for the ultimate gaming setup. I worked with a guy who was a Make-A-Wish kid, and he said he wished for a puppy and was denied. It makes sense that they're not going to give live animals to a little kid. Well, it's between that and the shotgun. When I was a baby until I was 5, I had cancer and got some wishes. My first wish was for a computer. I only wanted a computer because it came with a mouse. Yes, I thought it came with a real mouse. So, obviously it was rejected because you can't have pets when you basically live in a hospital and my family is broke anyway, so they couldn't give us a pet. I ended up getting some dope googly eye glasses and an epic trip to Disney World. It was the only family vacation we ever got to go on. I didn't know the kid at all, but he died from cancer his senior year of high school when I was a sophomore. We had an assembly for him. His name was Tyler. His wish was a gift to his best friend. Tyler went to a computer store with his friend and asked him to show him the best computer there. Then Tyler bought the best computer there for his friend using Make-A-Wish donation money, only to die a little later. Such a selfless guy. Tyler met Imagine Dragons 3 years before his death and they became friends. Imagine Dragons dedicated It's Time to Tyler. Whenever I hear that song, I think of this. It chokes me up every time. I worked for Make-A-Wish, Junior Genie as I like to say. We had to say no to wishes all the time. Either the person the kid wanted to meet didn't grant wishes, the place they wanted to go to didn't grant wishes, their wish was ridiculously expensive or prohibitive, their doctor didn't sign off on the wish as it wasn't a good idea for their health, and so on. For the most part, our volunteers were pretty good at helping kids zero in on that perfect wish. I've helped coordinate some wishes that I was surprised to see were approved. Usually it's trips to far distances with a lot of stops and long stays. It's one thing to go to Japan. It's another to go to Japan for 2 weeks. It's another to go to Japan for 2 weeks and go to 10 different attractions. Not all of them give us free tickets. Many don't even give discounts. Most kids had cookie-cutter wishes. Disney World, Paris, Meet the President, etc. Those were my bread and butter. I hate to call them cookie-cutter because I know it's such a precious memory for the kid and their family. Working there was a precious memory for me too. And I enjoyed coordinating everyone's trips. Unusual, frequent, high medical needs, lots of family, what have you. It was such an amazing thing to be a part of. I knew a friend who had cancer and overcame it, and he talked about Make-A-Wish. If it's not accepted, you apparently get a first-class trip to Disney World most people can't afford. He said he went to Disney World because he wanted to meet a skater that was in Europe on some tour. I was really lucky to have my Make-A-Wish granted, and I just want to say they really go above and beyond. My mom has always talked about going to Hawaii, and we knew it was pretty unrealistic for a family of 4. I was pretty young when I made my wish, so I didn't even know all that Hawaii had to offer, but I chose to go there for my wish. They put us up in a penthouse suite on Waikiki Beach, and I've never experienced anything more special in my life. Everything and everyone there wanted to make sure my family had an unforgettable time, and we sure did. We were able to forget about the cancer for a little while and feel like a normal family again. Thank you so much to Make-A-Wish and all that contribute. I have experience with Make-A-Wish in the last year due to my son's condition. This was a question I asked, and the response I was given was they will do anything they can within reason. One kid wanted a swimming pool in his backyard, and they did that. Because of how the process goes with Make-A-Wish, they ask the kid a lot of questions to determine what the child wants and to ensure there isn't any influence from the parents. My wife and I sat with my son while they asked him a lot of questions over about a 1-hour period to determine what he wanted to do. They asked my wife and I to sit there silently while he answered honestly. We are going to go to Legoland and meet Darth Vader sometime in 2019. I was a Make-A-Wish kid around 20 years ago. I was 5. I asked to be turned into a dinosaur. They said no. 0 out of 10, worst organization, they hate kids, boo. A couple of years ago, I went to Disney at Orlando, and there was a little boy running around wearing a shirt that said, "I'm a Make-A-Wish kid." My friend had to comfort me when I cried because the toddler's mom and aunt told the pretzel vendor his Make-A-Wish was originally, "Make mommy happy." I got genuinely emotional reading that, and I'm so glad I'm not crying on mic right now. The moment I met with the workers, I asked to go to the moon, but was turned down. Tried to compromise with space in general, ended up going to Italy. Not as cool. One of my nieces is a Make-A-Wish recipient. She had stage 4 rhabdomyosarcoma. They flew her, her sisters, her dad, and her grandma to Disney World, and they had the time of their lives. She's 6 years cancer-free and still talks about how grateful she was for that trip. She's just turned 14, and her younger sister talks about how it was her only plane ride ever. That organization is amazing and will forever have all of our support. I would like to add that the Ronald McDonald House Charities is another amazing organization that put my family up for housing in Manhattan during her treatment, over 2 years in the hospital at a minimal cost. Before that, we were driving 3 hours each way every time she needed chemo. Also, shout out to the Sloan Kettering Oncology Ward for taking care of her and making her feel like a kid while she was going through treatment. I think we all know by now the comedian who had a kid request he show up to the child's funeral dressed as a giant member. Kid made it through his illness. The comedian is named Russell Howard, and I gotta say, laughter is the best medicine. My son chose a Disney cruise. He didn't even hesitate in his pick. Probably because we were on day 1 of a Disney cruise we had been planning for over a year when he took a small tumble in our stateroom and wound up breaking his femur. Because, unbeknownst to us, his leg was filled with Ewing sarcoma. This trip he had been looking forward to for so long was destroyed before it even really started. So when it was wish time, he asked for a redo of our cruise. We waited until he had been off of chemo for a couple of months, and we had a wonderful time. We even added days on at Disney World from our DVC timeshare after the cruise. Both the Make-A-Wish folks and the Disney cruise employees told my son to make sure he wore his Make-A-Wish shirt to the parks when we were there. He did one of the days, and even though that wasn't part of his wish, the Disney cast members all treated him great. It was so nice to see him have such a wonderful trip after a ruined dream vacation and a year of non-stop hospital stays. By the way, he is doing great now. He hit 2 years off chemo this past September. I got a wish as a kid, then survived. The biggest, best thing I could think of was to go to Chuck E. Cheese's. I have no idea why I was fixated on that. To the credit of some good peeps, to Chuck E. Cheese's I went. I couldn't be around other people, so they opened it up at night. People deep cleaned it, sterilizing each ball in the ball pit. There was dedication there. Then someone who was cleared medically worked it. Don't remember most of it, was pretty young, mostly just remember the bits I found exciting, but that dang rat casino still makes me smile whenever I see one. Moral of the story, never bet against Make-A-Wish when dealing with logistics. Every ball in pit. Kid I know got cancer in elementary school. He was always into history and US presidents, so we asked to meet him. They flew his whole family out to DC to meet George W. Bush. Also, he actually spent more time with them than was allotted in his daily planner according to the dad. The kid beat cancer and is still doing okay. Not a recipient, but worked at a Hard Rock Cafe. A Wish kid's wish was to see Paul McCartney live, so they came in to eat dinner before his concert down the road from the restaurant. We sat him next to some signed Beatles guitars and sheets of lyrics and the such. As an avid Beatles fan myself, I was able to serve them. I sat and talked with that 6-year-old about the Beatles for a good hour, played all the Beatles songs, and had their music videos playing on the TVs throughout the restaurant. It was super humbling with how excited this kid was to go see Paul, and just be able to be outside the hospital for the night. And also super heartbreaking seeing his dad's face the whole dinner. I've never seen such pain, and I think about him frequently. I'm from Minnesota. When I had leukemia 30 years ago, I remember my wish was to go to the Grand Canyon. My parents straight up vetoed me. And instead the family, 2 sisters, went to Disney World and other Orlando attractions through the Give Kids the World program. It was the right decision, but still. Was it the right decision? Because it sounds to me like Disney World is full of more Make-A-Wish kids than actual people. Also, the Make-A-Wish Foundation should have let you have your wish in spite of your parents. That's the whole reason they have those conversations with you. I got offered a Make-A-Wish when I was 5 years old because I had leukemia. My parents declined their offer because my survival rate was very, very likely, and they wanted another kid who was less likely to survive have it. After I was cured, they took me and my twin brother to Disneyland to celebrate using their own money. My parents are wonderful people. In this thread, wish denied, went to Disney. My son was a Make-A-Wish recipient. He wanted to go to Europe. They were planning it, and his piece of crap birth father wouldn't allow my kids to get passports. Great father, huh? Son had like 36% chance of survival from brain cancer, and he said no passports. Anyways, his second wish was an RV trip to the Badlands, Yellowstone, and the Rockies. They got us the biggest bus type, I think it's A-class, RV they could get. Set everything up for us, gave us itineraries, and off we went. It's such an incredible organization, and luckily, my son had a blast after finally having the okay to go. He's also in remission and doing well, thank God. Make-A-Wish is incredible. Fun fact, the amount of kids that wish to go to Disney World is so large that Disney built its own resort for them called Give Kids the World, where only families from Make-A-Wish can stay. They have special buses to transport them, doctors are always on staff, and there's special games and activities at the resort for kids who can't make it to the park that day. I adore Make-A-Wish and everything it's done for kids. It helped send my friend to the Bahamas when she was sick, and she said it was one of the best experiences of her life. It was mentioned several times below, but Give Kids the World was actually made by Henry Landworth, a Holocaust survivor. My daughter was granted a wish. She really wanted to meet Taylor Swift and see her in concert, but Taylor was not touring at the time, so we, her parents, kiboshed that wish. She was not healthy enough to enjoy a long concert, and I didn't want her to postpone her wish since we weren't sure if or how long she might live. In the end, she chose to go to the SeaWorld Resort in Florida and swim with the dolphins. She ended up being scared to death of them and refused to even go in the water. Make-A-Wish sent us to Universal while we were there too, and she had fun. That was 6 years ago, and she is now in remission. We took her to a Taylor Swift concert this last summer, and I think she enjoyed it way more than she would have 6 years ago. So when I was 15, I got to make a wish. My uncle really pushed to ask to meet Tiger Woods and play golf with him. I wasn't into that. Neither were my cervical tumors. I was getting better, and I knew I was going to be okay. I told the wish peeps that I wanted to bow out, but they were pushy. Right in front of my mom, I said I wanted to hit a blunt with Snoop Dogg and wouldn't accept any other wish. That got shut down. I'm fine and 34 now. We did the standard Disney World trip. My son only had months to live, and we had a small window when he was well enough to go. Bruce was 5, so he didn't really have any big or creative ideas. He'd only been to Disney World once for a single day, and my husband wasn't able to come. He told the wish grantees that he wanted to show Daddy the giant castle and ride roller coasters with no lines. Even though it seemed like the cookie-cutter wish, my son's Make-A-Wish experience was truly amazing. I still cry thinking about how much that trio meant to him and our entire family. My son was treated like absolute royalty during the entire trip. Volunteers we met at Give Kids the World, the resort where we stayed, really connected with him, and even flew in from states away when he was on hospice and for his funeral. I love reading about the amazing and unique experiences that others request. I will definitely be following this post. We became so close with our wish granters. Those people are truly angels in this earth. I am so thankful to everyone involved in Make-A-Wish, donors, volunteers, everyone. This organization made such a huge impact on our lives, and we made memories that our family will cherish forever. This doesn't answer your question, but I had cancer when I was 3 and apparently have been approached by Make-A-Wish. Unfortunately, I was only 3 and too young to actually make a reasonable wish, so the wish fell to my parents. They asked for furniture. Furniture! I'm told that I was very sarcastic, even at a young age. When they told me I could wish for whatever I wanted, I thought I could think of something impossible. A big brick house, so the big bad wolf can't blow it down. Make-A-Wish people said that they ran out of bricks granting their last wish. They handed me a catalog of playhouses to choose from. I defiantly flipped immediately to the back and poked one at random before probably returning to my Studio Ghibli movie. And that is the story of how Make-A-Wish built me a 2-story playhouse with heating, air, and electricity. I'm so glad they ran out of bricks. My mom became a wish granter shortly after my son went on his Make-A-Wish trip. She's done many wishes and has even been wish granter of the year for her region a couple times. The only one that was a flat-out no was one recipient who asked for a sexual favor. Other than that, wishes for new cars are always a no, but Make-A-Wish will basically pimp out a car already owned by the recipient. Other than that, she's been a wish granter for everything from trips to shopping sprees to even being on an episode of Fixer Upper where she was wish granter for 2 boys who wanted an accessible playground in their backyard. I got to have mine granted in 1999 when I was 8. I wanted to see my 2 favorite baseball players, Mark McGwire and Chipper Jones, play. Make-A-Wish set up everything: hotel, tickets to the game for my whole family, and even tickets to Six Flags. Before the first game, they brought us down for batting practice. Got to meet the whole Braves lineup. Didn't meet a single player from the Cardinals, and we were told McGwire specifically declined the request. Braves won that game. I feel karma paid off too. Braves made it to the World Series, Chipper won MVP, and is now a Hall of Famer. McGwire would later get marked for using steroids, will not make the Hall of Fame, and Cardinals finished under 500. My mom worked for Make-A-Wish. A little kid wanted to build a treehouse in his front yard. Make-A-Wish denied him for being too hard to coordinate. Make-A-Wish must not have approached the right people. I've been in construction for a long time. I could get about 30 qualified people together on short notice to build a treehouse for a terminally ill kid in a weekend or so. Shout out to Ron Swanson's old man on Reddit for that comment. Username checks out. Men of Reddit, who have found out their child isn't actually theirs? How did you react and how are things now? When I was in the Navy, I had an on-again, off-again relationship with a girl back home. On my last deployment, my girlfriend told me via email that she was knocked up. I accepted it, emailed my parents, told the military, all that jazz. I ended up getting discharged, so I went back home and took care of my pregnant girlfriend. She had the baby, and I thought I was the father for 5 months, while she was on vacation with a girlfriend. While she was gone, I got an email from her boyfriend telling me that they had been together for the last 4 months and also for the week in Myrtle Beach I was bankrolling. After that, I got the paternity test, found out it wasn't mine, and told her I was done and wanted no contact. Crappy part is, my parents still babysit and treat the kid like their grandkid, so she's at a lot of family functions and such. Also, the guy wasn't even the father. Forget her. I had a fiancé. We were supposed to be getting married. Then she went on a holiday by herself because she just needed to get away. She came back pregnant to an unemployed heroin user. I had a job and an apartment. She told me, "You've never done anything to prove you really loved me. Now's your chance. Accept me and the baby." No thanks. Last I heard of her, she's an unmarried mother of 2, and forget her. This one's a long one, so be ready for that. 2 years of DNA tests that the state continually reported as inconclusive. It led to going someplace out of state. Got it done. Got the test results back. Less than 2% probability of genetic match. Huh. So, I called her up. Asked, "So, you want to tell me what the real story is?" 2 weeks before we had our night under the sheets that resulted in the talk 9 months later, her father had come home drunk out of his mind and forced himself upon her. I still recall the tone of her voice asking me if I had actually taken the test and that it was real. Well, turns out her mother heard that conversation, notified someone, and dad took a DNA test. So her dad is the dad of her kid. And I felt horrible for her. I can't even joke about this. Her dad was arrested. The kid, last I heard, was doing well. It forced her to clean up her act. She'd gone in for heavy drug and alcohol use, and it drove us apart before the child did. And that was 10 or so years ago. We don't talk. Every once in a while I'll think about the kid, but I don't know. This world ain't a nice place. And with all the crap she'd gone through, I wasn't going to make it worse. So I left it alone. From what little I heard from mutual friends over the years, apparently dad came out of prison 3 years later a Bible guy. This all took place in Texas, by the way. Supposedly he was doing his best to support her and whatnot, but there was some kind of falling out and she moved out and in with one of her girlfriends up in Dallas. I can't even fathom it, to be honest. I still consider the man to be scum-sucking trash for putting his daughter through all that, and I can't exactly fault her at all for her literally wanting me to be the father. She was so hoping that it was the case because it reviled her. The sobbing on the phone when the realization hit was shattering. I remember being on the phone for hours, most of it her crying. I recall my mom after the fact telling me I should have sued her. In my mind, it was done. I had 2 years of my life interspersed with phone calls, genetic testing visits, even bounty hunters showing up at my door in place of work serving me with notices from her family to show up or else. She had to raise this kid with her crappy father the whole time being ignorant. All that time? It's awful. A lot of you asked why I left her, why she didn't get an abortion, etc. First of all, when she had originally called me and we had the talk 9 months later, I asked her what she wanted to do. Originally, she wanted to abort it. This was back in 2003-2004, so access to clinics was readily available. I asked if that's what she really wanted. She insisted, and I had sent her a money order to help pay for it. She never got the abortion. I originally got a story. She went in, took the pill they gave her, and it made her so sick she left. I was 22 to 23 and didn't really know anything about how they do abortions. What we learned in high school involved either the scrape or the vacuum cleaner methods, so I took her word for it. Sometime later, she went to the courts, at her family's insistence, and wanted me to provide child support, and that's when I had the choice to either pay for it or get the testing. Talking it out with my parents, because if I knew what I was doing, I decided on getting the test done. If I was going to pay for it, best to make sure I was the one who should have been responsible. At this point in our relationship, it had been about a year since that night we got down and dirty, and broke up about 3 to 4 months after that night. I had moved back home with my parents. The job I had in Houston went out of business, I was out of money and had no other options. We broke up due to her frequent alcohol and drug usage. I never understood the need for anyone to get completely wasted on alcohol. 1 to 2 drinks? Fine. Smoke some dope? It's fine. Cocaine? What the heck? No. So I ended it. And this was all before I'd even learned she was pregnant. The first test, for whatever reason, took dang near 6 months before anyone heard anything. The results came back inconclusive. I never got any more information than that, so either something happened at the lab or I don't know. I wound up getting referred to a place about an hour away from my parents and went there to get it all done. So by the time 2 years since that night of conception rolled around, we finally had the results in. I remember opening the envelope and looking the sheet over. A lot of it I didn't understand. I did see less than 2% chance of genetic match. I called the number at the top of the form and spoke to a woman, provided the info, and she took me through it. There was absolutely no way I could be the father. Now, I'll admit, I was elated at first. I thanked the woman, hung up, and looked at my cell. I had to call her. And reality set in. I called her. After all the crying and admissions, I asked what really happened the day she claimed she went in for the abortion. On her way to the clinic, she said something inside her clicked and she wanted to keep it. The roughly $600 I had sent, she used it for clothes and stuff for the baby. I asked why she couldn't have just been honest from the start, and the results of the test were why. Some of you asked why I didn't become the child's father, because I wasn't ready for it at that point in my life. 23 years old, no job, no prospects, thousands of miles gone, and I never got along with her family. It wouldn't have been good for either of us. In the end, we agreed not to be angry with one another. She was mad at her father though. I don't know if that ever went away, though I highly doubt it did. Also, I wasn't ripping on Texas. I actually really like Texas. The people are friendly. I simply wanted to provide some geolocation to what happened is all. I spent 2 years living in Houston working for a local IT firm. Met a lot of great people. Had some amazing barbecue. Seriously, it's like you can't go 2 blocks without hitting a barbecue joint that doesn't rock. And met some folks who are religious but not Bible-thumping nuts. As far as sex criminals go, only ever met the one, and you're reading about it. So that's it. Let's go with something a little bit lighter this time around, shall we? I have a mixed-race child. Originally was told it was mine until she actually gave birth. Since she was mixed, she came out pretty light-skinned. Very light-skinned, actually. But as she got older, her skin got darker and darker. Let the mother stick around for about 1 year to 2 years. She wasn't from where we were living and didn't have anywhere else to go. Didn't want to kick baby out into the streets. Finally, I had enough of her and kicked her out. But I ended up getting attached to the little girl. Fast forward 2 years and I'm single, lonely, depressed, and missing the little girl. I've had no contact with them. Through the grapevine, I hear my little girl's real dad has nothing to do with her. No contact, no father. From the story I get, the real dad was married and refused her. I set up a meeting with my little girl after 2 years to get a feeling on the situation, and it was like those 2 years never happened. She ran up to me like she just saw me yesterday. I talked to the mother and I said that I'll take care of her. We never went to court. No child support has ever been filed. We don't fight about anything. I tell her if she needs anything as far as money or clothes, whatever, I'll take care of it. She's now 10, I'm married, my wife accepts her with open arms and loves her like I do. She's an awesome kid, great student, no troubles. I have to teach her a bit of humility because all she's concerned about is being beautiful, but if that's my biggest worry with her, I think that's okay. I wouldn't change anything at all. I will tell you one thing. I live in the South and you would think that a married white couple with 2 normal white kids and an older mixed girl, one would think you get more looks from white folks. Surprisingly, it's the black folks that give us more WTF looks than anything. But like I said, I wouldn't trade her for anything. I love that silly girl. So I'm on the other side of the fence. Basically, I'm dating this girl for about 3 years. Rocky relationship and all that jazz. I break up with her and move back to my hometown for a period. While back, she asked if she can come visit. First mistake, but believe me, intimacy was really golden between us. Anyway, 2 months after the visit, she's pregnant. Not the best news in the world, but I'm from a family of certain values on these matters, so I own up. After spending a week with her and discussing what to do, I go back home and start to prepare stuff. 3 days later, she calls and claims a miscarriage, and we sort of end it and it dies out in the next few weeks. Fast forward 7 months, and I move back to the same city, capital of Norway, Oslo, and continue my career. Suddenly, I see a Facebook post about this girl getting a child, 9 months and 2 days after her visit. It turns out she had been dating another dude for the whole 3 years we had been dating. They even lived together for 2 of the years. She kind of just decided that she felt better with him as the dad. So basically, she convinced him he was the dad. So he announced to the whole world and was just about to go on fatherly leave when I found out. I quietly asked her for a paternity test, and to no surprise, it stated with 99.99% certainty that I'm the father. Crap's unraveling, he's not happy, obviously, and has to tell the world that nope, just kidding, I'm not a dad. Anyway, 4 years later, it's all good, and we have 50% shared custody, but dang, it was a few funky months in the start. After some questions and stuff, yes, I did spend time at her apartment. She had me over every time the other guy was away and such. She also fake moved into my apartment for 6 months. Not a man, never been in this situation, but I am the child of one of these situations, so I thought I'd chime in. TLDR, Mom stayed with her husband at first, and he is legally my father, but my dad decided he wanted to stay in the picture, so my mom eventually married him, and I have 2 dads. My mom got married when she was 17 and had 3 sons with her first husband. I'm gonna call him Ben. They were together for a long time, I think about 18 years total. Somewhere along the way, she realized she was caught in a loveless marriage, but couldn't really do anything about it. My dad, who I'll call Dave, moved in across the street and the 2 of them started spending time together, and she started an affair with him. They weren't careful enough, and next thing you know, my mom is pregnant with me. She knew from the get-go I wasn't Ben's, and he kind of had an idea too because they weren't intimate that often and the math didn't work out. But I think he went along with it just because he didn't want to think about what she was doing behind his back. My dad initially didn't want to have anything to do with me, so when I was born, they put down her husband's name on my birth certificate as the father and called it a day. Paternity tests were done though, and my mom confirmed what she already knew. Sorry, around here my details get a little fuzzy because my mom still hasn't given me a full and complete story. Dave still definitely didn't want to stick with my mom and I, and it was just agreed that Ben would raise me as his, and they would forget it happened. He was and is a great guy and an awesome dad. Now the way I've heard it is Dave, despite his convictions, couldn't stay away because he loved my mom so much, and once he laid eyes on me, he was head over heels. Some of my earliest memories are going to visit him in his apartment. At some point between the time I was 2 and the time I was 3, my mom and Ben divorced. I don't remember it and was kept largely out of it, but I understand it was very messy. Because I was legally Ben's daughter, I got the same visitations as my other brothers who were still under 18. My mom and Dave married when I was 4, and Dave was never happy about these visits, but I was because I loved Ben so much. Ben was always daddy, Dave was dad. It was understood, and I never confused the two or made reference to one being my parent in front of the other. Even as a 4 and 5-year-old, I knew the sensitive nature of the situation. It was never confusing either, because they really are two very different people who I think provided me with a great balance of paternal figures in my life. Like I said, Ben was always daddy, sweet, endearing, with the heart of gold who just wanted his little girl to be happy and would spoil her rotten to see her smile and make stupid jokes to get a giggle out of her. Dave was dad, still kind and loved me to death, but more of the disciplinarian who I knew not to mess with. My mom's not married to either of them now, another long-winded story entirely, but I consider both of them to be my father, and I consider both of them to have done the best job they could have, and I think I turned out alright. My boyfriend's daughter is not his. He broke his hand on a door when he found out, but he never once denied her. He is on her birth certificate, has his last name, the whole 9 yards. She is his baby girl and he is her daddy. End of story. His ex-wife still likes to hold it above his head though. If you don't do XYZ, I'm getting a DNA test on baby and you'll never see her again. Burns me up. Throwaway account for reasons. I was 16 and in high school when I was dating this girl who was my first love. We will call her Kay. Kay and I were intimate roughly 3 months before homecoming. We had only been dating for a few weeks prior to that. Being a hormonal teenager was a nice mix with a girl that was willing to put out. Things go by as they usually do. We still see each other and screw like rabbits. However, Kay was also hanging out with this other guy named Derek every time she wasn't around me. My best friend Matt starts telling me that he's seeing them hold hands and making up at the art room, etc. Sure as heck, I catch them in the middle of a hot and heavy session, but being the dumb kid that I was, I forgave her. A few days later, she tells me she hasn't had her period in the last 2 months. Eventually, we try to keep things on the down low until the day of homecoming, and by the time we're taking pictures, with my whole family around, of course, she announces that she's pregnant. So begins a spiral of madness for the next 7 months. After one last night of fun at our homecoming dance, we start discussing what we need to do in order to prepare for the baby. I start applying for jobs pretty much taking in the fact that my life is in order. No more fun for me now. We make preparations to get an apartment to provide for the kid. My folks are angry at me, not talking to me until they had to. The rumors around the school are crazy. What makes it worse is that most of them were accusing me of forcing myself onto Kay. Even my friends believed it. The rumor went out that I had forced myself on her with no protection and had my way with her. It got so out of hand that counselors would call me in daily to make sure that I was of sound mind. Being accused for being a sex criminal was insane for being 16, and I wouldn't ever wish that on anyone. It all blew up when I caught Kay sexting my best friend Matt. That's when I started thinking that something was up. I know, I was a freaking idiot. About 2 weeks after, she breaks up with me and starts dating Matt. She starts calling me and texting me, calling me a sex criminal and a piece of crap lowlife. Even though she said these things, she still loved me and wanted to support our kid. I really start having a mental breakdown, knowing that I can't trust anyone. Heck, even thought about eating a bullet just to end it all. I had no one. My folks moved to a different school to hope that I could start fresh, but despite this, the torment goes on until her delivery date. My whole family is there and the hospital and my stomach is in knots. I can't breathe. This was the night that my adult life would begin. Hours pass and she finally goes through her contractions and the baby is born. The baby comes out to be black. I wish I was joking, and I know how insane this all sounds. The worst part is that my best friend Matt was black. The sheer horror on Kay's face is something that I will never forget and something that I will never forgive. Immediately, I go for a DNA test, and a few weeks later, it comes back that it's not mine. My friend Matt was screwing my girlfriend behind my back the entire time. My whole high school and teenage years were ruined because these people couldn't tell the truth. Back in college, I was seeing a girl for a while. Kinda serious, more so for her than me apparently. She winds up pregnant. I was young, didn't really know what to do, but knew if it was mine, I would do the right thing and be the father. Major caveat, I have a physical condition that makes it highly unlikely that I can actually get anyone knocked up, and she knew this. Long story and possible identifying info, so I'm leaving the details out. Anyway, she swears up and down through the whole pregnancy that it could only be mine, so I went along with it. I was out of town the weekend the kiddo was born. She apparently tried to reach me, but this was long before cell phones, and I had gone home to a different city with a college friend to party, and in all likelihood avoided home during that time frame, since I was reasonably sure it wasn't mine. Kiddo was born, I went to see them a few times over the next few weeks, and then shortly after that, they get called by my folks that she had stopped by their house and introduced it to them as their new grandson. They were ecstatic and happy for me, and all the fun stuff they anticipated about being new grandparents. I had to basically put the brakes on real hard at that point and tell them I was pretty sure that it was not my kid. I pretty much knew after I saw it. One look at it, and there was just no connection at all. It was a baby, but I saw nothing there that I recognized as mine in any way, shape, or form. Due to the fact that she was already on the dole, the state mandated a paternity test. I figured I just might as well get it over with and showed up for the appointment when they told me to. Once the results came back, there was a less than 1% chance it was mine. I turned around, never looked back. Only saw her twice since then, and it's been 20 plus years now, but both times she was almost in tears trying to apologize for doing that to me back then. I heard through the grapevine who ended up being the actual father, and he already had a few bastards running around, so he was no help to them at all. Not only that, but his poor health and drug issues put him in an early grave, so that poor kid had no father figure growing up. Thankfully, I kept a level head through the whole ordeal and even got a letter of commendation from the county prosecutor's office saying that they wished even half the potential fathers were half as cooperative as I had been. TLDR, if you're gonna try and pin a kid on someone, make sure it's theirs if there's going to be a mandatory DNA test. Didn't make it that far, but had a little fling with a girl who I was honest and up in front with. It was a fling, and it wasn't gonna be serious. She agreed to it. So one time we were getting it on. Protection broke. I told her and she didn't seem to worry. Mind you, this was way before climax when I noticed. Also, I made sure there was no pre-emission. I had that when I put the new one on. Made sure that everything was good afterwards. Fast forward a couple weeks and she messages me saying she's preggo. I admit my heart jumped a little, but I called her calm as a British bloke drinking tea. She was so surprised that she asked why I wasn't freaking out and getting angry or panicking. Truth is, I knew that the likelihood of her being pregnant was very slim, and either way, I would man up no matter what. I asked her all the details. Was I the only one? Have you been drinking since the last time? And all that good stuff. I told her I wasn't ready for that, but the ultimate decision was hers to make. She started saying how she would never do such a thing, and I still stayed calm, told her we would talk in the morning. I was just meeting up with my boys to go party. She was shocked even more that I was still so calm and started asking where I was going because she was going out with her friends too. I didn't tell her. After that, I knew for sure she was trying to push my buttons. So the next day I spoke to her, she tells me she has to think about it. I said, take your time. Eventually, a few days later, she said she's not going to keep it and that she booked an appointment with her doctor who was in another city and over an hour away. She doesn't drive, and so I offered to give her a ride. She declined and said a friend would give her one. She said all she could to convince me that I don't need to go with her, so I backed off. I know where she worked, and she worked all day the day she was supposed to go, but she messaged me saying that she went and then she couldn't walk properly after. I played along and never spoke to her again. Mad props to this guy for having an iron will. I was dating a girl for 3 years who I had trusted. I was 18 at the time. She got pregnant. I was relatively safe, but everybody has slip-ups. I took my lumps and agreed to fatherhood and did the best I could. During the entirety of the pregnancy, she was pretty absent. She wouldn't talk to me much, sometimes for months at a time. I thought this was odd. It frustrated me beyond belief. Anyway, so later on a friend of hers started to work with me. He started to hook up with one of my coworkers. She told me he knew my GF and I was thinking, oh cool, interesting. Then she told me he banged my GF within the last year. I was mad. I called her up and talked with her. Apparently they did screw when we were on some break. This was entirely made up. The timing didn't match up with the pregnancy though, so I continued on my way to fatherhood with this soon-to-be mother that was all over the place. Eventually, she gave birth to a little girl. I wasn't there at the birth because I wasn't told it was happening. A couple of months down the road of trying to contact her, she let me see my girl. It was great. We started talking again and acting like parents. Well, just to make sure that this new baby girl was mine, I went ahead and had a paternity test. She was a 1% match, and therefore was not my daughter. I was appalled. I went to her place and asked her what this was about. She swore up and down it had to be mine. DNA is DNA. She wasn't my little girl after all. I left her, on her knees crying for me to come back to her apartment. I got a text later that day. She told me she remembered. She got blackout drunk and screwed this guy at a party. She claimed he basically forced himself upon her. I don't believe this at all. So I went through 9 months of a pregnancy and 3 months of actual fatherhood before I found out. Now I don't talk to her at all. I hear rumors occasionally about her, but I am so glad she is no longer in my life. TLDR, screw that woman. Psychologists, therapists, counselors, etc. What are some things people tend to think are normal but should really be checked out? Disclaimer: this video is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Please see a licensed professional for health advice and counseling. Hi, I'm a kid who fell through the cracks. Got diagnosed with dyscalculia when I was a sophomore in high school. Throughout the years, my parents would tell counselors, psychologists, etc. that something wasn't right, and it was more than me being bad at math. It took a really cool teacher I had pushing and advocating for me to get an official diagnosis before anyone did anything. I understand fully that sometimes parents can be a pain, but please, 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 if a kid is 15 or 16 years old and is stuck at a 5th grade math level, look into it. People normalize abusive behaviors by loved ones all the time. Being able to identify your own personal boundaries and then enforce them with others for your own well-being is, unfortunately, not innate. Therapist here. If you grew up with or currently are part of a family where the whole family has to work to keep one or more members of the family in a good mood or appeased, that's not healthy. People are in charge of their own feelings. It is not your job to appease others so that they can emotionally regulate themselves. Disassociating with friends. Current friend of mine is having real struggles emotionally and mentally. We're still talking, but he's been distancing himself from other people. We reach breakthroughs every now and again, but it's been difficult. Psychotherapist here. Some things I see regularly that could have been caught earlier before they became a problem: unhealthy coping mechanisms. For example, drinking to, quote, relax frequently or smoking a lot. Even something like promiscuity can be a red flag that a person is trying to avoid dealing with something stressful by distracting themselves. Self-harm. Hitting yourself, banging your head on things, burning yourself on purpose, cutting yourself, etc. All of those things indicate that it's time to talk with a professional. Quote-unquote normal child-teen behaviors that are not actually normal, like running away or getting into fights. Not communicating. When this happens, something is usually wrong. Not always, as some folks are quieter than others. But if a child, teen, or adult rarely speaks, or if they're silent in the presence of their parent or significant other, it's time to get them to see a professional alone to have their safety assessed. I've seen individuals who are literally shut down due to having been profoundly abused by the people they live with, and one of the main signs of that is silence. I've also seen people in perfectly good homes who cannot communicate due to extreme anxiety, and without professional help, it's hard for them to overcome this. Mood swings. When a person's moods change from one extreme to another fairly often or regularly, that is another concerning symptom. Sometimes they are considered eccentric or hormonal, but that sort of thing can be a sign of many problems from bipolar disorder to post-traumatic stress disorder. Self-sabotaging behavior can ruin your life quickly. If you have an event in your life that has affected you negatively and you seem to find yourself exhibiting irrational or incongruent behaviors, see a counselor. You don't have to have any certain pathology to seek mental wellness counseling. Thinking that 5 hours of sleep per night is okay. Rapid weight gain or loss with no obvious medical cause. Relationship problems. Don't get me freaking started. To clarify, what I really mean is that poor sleep is usually a symptom of something more serious like depression or anxiety. Our bodies are often not as well as hiding things as our minds are. I'm curious how much procrastinating and or lack of motivation to do stuff is normal and how much isn't. From what my therapist told me, if you would simply rather be doing other stuff, that's perfectly normal. But if you absolutely could not bring yourself to do homework, there's something wrong. I used to have severe anxiety attacks about homework to the point where when I needed to do it, I'd either be completely drained and go to sleep, regardless of time of day, or have a huge breakdown. Executive dysfunction, the inability to do things that you know you need to do, is a major symptom of ADHD. Take a look into other symptoms and see if that might fit. See a doctor if your life is affected. I'm going to word this incorrectly, so bear with me if I say something inaccurate, but I have a fun fact from my therapist. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that deals with anxiety. It also deals with studying, but I'm not sure if it's the ability to force yourself to focus or if it's something else. Either way, the frontal lobe is important. It turns out that it's bad for your brain to be in a constant state of anxiety. So if you had a crappy childhood, like me, you're screwed because, as my therapist put it, the constant stress wrecks your frontal lobe. Which explains why it's almost impossible for me to study unless I'm cramming for an exam in a couple hours or starting to write a paper an hour before it's due. I can't activate the part of my brain necessary to focus on my task if I'm not in a state of panic. I don't know anything about how it ties into things like the fact that I keep my clothes strewn around until 10 minutes before a guest shows up, but I suspect it might be a similar thing. So I'd say that my major lack of motivation isn't normal, and it makes me wonder how much better I'd be in my classes if I'd had a normal childhood. There have been a lot of my patients who have been pretty surprised when I've told them, hey, that's anxiety or depression, when they just thought their behaviors were typical for everyone. Not being able to maintain friendships, constantly being nervous about the safety of your child to the point where you hate being alone with your child without your partner, not being able to motivate yourself to do things, especially things you once enjoyed, feeling excessively tired all the time, not being able to calm down and just thinking the same thoughts over and over without feeling worried. Other things we can help with: having a hard time trusting others, trying to recover a relationship from infidelity, not knowing why your kid is misbehaving so much and needing guidance, helping to improve communication within your relationships. If you experience these things and more, therapists can help. Let us help you. Edited to add, I've noticed costs coming up in a lot of these replies. I hate that cost is such a barrier for people. Sometimes colleges offer free or discounted therapy from their students. When you're training to be a therapist, you spend at least 1 year working as a therapist while meeting with the supervisor each week to consult on your cases and get guidance on moving forward. My college unfortunately didn't offer discounted sessions, but I know many do. It might be worth checking out. Some systems also have charity care options for people with low incomes. That can be worth pursuing as well. To find a therapist, if you're in the US, you can call your insurance company and get a list of places that take your insurance. That's a good place to start. A good rule of thumb as to whether a behavior or symptom should be checked out is the same we use to determine a diagnosable disorder, if it causes impairment in one or more areas of life. The range of what's normal is huge, but if something keeps you from going to school or work, keeps you from maintaining basic hygiene, from maintaining your friendships, familiar relationships, or romantic relationships, it's causing impairment and you should seek help. Number 1. This is not an exhaustive criteria for diagnosable mental illness. There are many criteria that we consider in diagnosing, but the one criterion that is present for all is that it must cause impairment. Number 2. Enjoyment is also an important aspect of functioning. If you are getting by in your life but are miserable, get help. You don't have to live like that. Number 3. Serial killers and sociopaths represent a very small percentage of the population and rarely seek help willingly. This was not directed at them. Number 4. The areas of functioning I listed are general examples pulled from the Western culture where I live and was trained. Different cultures have different values and the norms of your culture should be taken into account. Number 5. If you are unbothered by your level of functioning in these areas relative to cultural expectations, good for you. Most people considering this advice likely have a sense that something is not where they want it to be in their life and are looking for confirmation that it's bad enough to seek help. If you're not concerned, my advice is not directed at you. Number 6. No one is saying that being content with having no interpersonal connections is inherently pathological. What if I'm very high functioning? Like, I make it to work every day and have a social life and I'm able to clean up after myself, but I have no purpose. I'm not actually interested in things. I just exist to pay my bills and smile for the audience. It's like I'm just staring at life's clock waiting for my time to be up. I feel like the world is ending, but it's not scary. I'm frustrated it's taking so long. I'm just tired of existing. Is this fine as long as I show up to work and do my laundry? Okay, wow. Y'all have told me to have kids, do drugs, see a therapist, go for a walk, make a friend, to stop being an attention grabber. This is great. Everybody has a freaking solution as usual. But so many of you feel this way, so I'm glad to know it's not just me. I attempted to end my life about 6 years ago. Back then, I could barely get out of bed or feed myself. I don't feel that way anymore, so I guess I thought maybe I still wasn't depressed, that I was finally over it. I took a big step a few days ago and saw a therapist, and I have another appointment scheduled. I didn't think this post would turn into what it is. It was a late night post where my thoughts burrowed out of my skull in a fit of abject despondency. Thanks for the kind words and the unkind words. I just hope you all have gotten something out of this. The attitudes of their parents. No, really. There are a lot of bad things that current parents do that are just seen as normal when they're not, and they have long-lasting psychological effects from emotional damage. Inability to regulate your emotions. Also, negative self-talk. We talk to ourselves way worse than any person could. Let me expand on this if you don't mind. Generally, your emotions should be like a calm river. No needless waves, no great sadness, anxiety, angry outbursts, misplaced fear, but also no great ecstasy. All these feelings have their place and will be experienced at one point or another, but your default state should be calm, like an EKG with an occasional spike. Similarly, when a negative spike happens, one should be able to manage it internally, ideally without the use of external substances, and in an adequate time, move past it. I think that's what we should all aim for, myself definitely included. Shadow people. One question we asked was if they ever saw, heard, or smelled anything others didn't. This came up more often than you might think. I drive trains, which is a career fraught with extensive sleep deprivation and random sleeping times. The company I work for now is really good about rest days each week, but I used to work for another company where I averaged 5 sleep cycles for every 7 days. Also, very stressful work environment between constantly having the company try to trick you into getting fired, or even just how easy it is to screw up and kill a whole town of people. So, shadow people is a common occurrence that we just get used to. They usually appear on the edge of your vision, right in front of you. Some guys will call them track people. They're standing or walking down the track just past your headlights. Just knowing about it makes it easier to just ignore your mind and trust your instincts. But being off duty and awake for 36 to 72 hours at a time gets weird. I start to hear a low murmur, like static or something mechanical. Or maybe a radio that is just barely out of tune in the next room, just loud enough to know you're hearing something. And things moving around in your periphery, like things that are really there, disappear and come back randomly. The need for some parents to speak with their children about adult problems. No, your young child does not need to be aware that you are struggling financially or that daddy slept with the lady next door. The parents that tell their children that they are going to go and speed my car into a tree purposely, off myself while you were at school, or slit my wrist when I shower tonight. And parents that they feel they need their children fixed as it's the child and not the family unit as a whole that needs support and or assistance. Just a few recent ones I've heard. In regards to financial comments, taken from a previous comment of mine as I've been getting asked to answer this, I'm talking more on the extreme side and towards children that have been extremely hurt and money talk was used as a tool to make the child feel at fault and guilt to some degree. I'm currently working with a child now that is triggered whenever he hears talk about finances and feels it's his fault they will eventually become homeless. They won't, but this is what he's told. If only he didn't eat so much, if only he didn't have so many school fees. Not to mention the arguing between carers over finances. This must be his fault too though, they're yelling and shouting because of this. I've seen a lot of people dismiss their depression and other mental illnesses because it's not that bad, or other people have it worse, or I can and should be able to handle it on my own. You shouldn't have to suffer through mental illness, even if you technically can. You deserve to be happy, and therapists and psychiatrists are there to help you learn how to help yourself. It's not a weakness to find someone who can assist you in figuring out coping skills or prescribe you medications to help fine-tune your brain's neurotransmitters. This post right here, this is what I've been saying. Some people just say, oh, I'll cope, or it's fine, when it's not. It's like they're not allowed to have a mental illness when in reality they're in survival mode and they can't register healthy emotions or mechanisms. It's like a post I read out before. If you're just existing, living day to day detached from everything and everyone, being constantly tired, or having persistent thoughts of death, that's not normal. And I get it. The American mental health care system sucks. It's not easy to get help, most of the time because it's financially unviable for them. But a lot of times, the people who need it the most won't ask for it. It's because they don't feel the need to. They don't want to bother anyone, or they think it's too difficult, or they have anxiety about making appointments. I don't mean to be pushy or ranty, but I sincerely hope anyone who needs a therapist watching this video gets the help they deserve, because people aren't all awful, especially not you. From the patient side, it took having a massive anxiety attack at my doctor's office to find out that no, massive anxiety attacks in front of strangers isn't common or normal. Research psychologist checking in, if your toddler is doing socially unusual behaviors such as not responding to name, not responding to a social smile, not pointing using gestures, using your hands and arms as if they were a tool or extension of the body, engaging in repetitive behaviors, not responding to your use of gaze to direct their attention to distal objects, check with a pediatrician about getting assessed for autism spectrum disorder. Perfectionism. While a spectrum and everyone wants to do good work, an obsession with perfection is not something to be proud of and definitely not healthy. Healthy work ethic is doing your best and then letting go, as in recognizing no matter how much effort you put in, the result is, to some extent, out of your control. And that's okay. The intent and effort counts more than the end result. If you get obsessed with the end result only, you will hurt yourself because you never have full control over your end result, but you do have full control over the intensity and dedication you will put in, even if that doesn't translate well. It is a fact of life, sometimes things don't work out. So people who never, and I mean never, have anything less than flawless work all the time are paying for it somehow. Burnout or mental stress or overtime or medications or drugs to keep going or etc. It is pathological to want or to think you can realistically have such control that your work is flawless all the time. I'd like to point out that there are tons of things that are normal but are not healthy or ideal. Normal is just what the statistical majority are doing, not what would be best for them. I think the main question should be, what impact is blank having on my life and relationships, rather than wondering how it compares to the average person's experience or behaviors. Excellent point. One of the fundamental points of any successful therapy is aiding the patient in distinguishing whether a behavior is self-helping and or other society helping, or it is self-harming and or other society harming. Many harmful and even malicious thinking and behavior patterns are common, but are definitely unhealthy. Conversely, many greatly healthy and self-helping ways of thinking and behavior may be even actively discouraged by some people in society. See part about unhealthy things being common. So ultimately, anyone seeking a happy and successful life must learn to judge things from a functional perspective, and ultimately throw the loads of negativity and bullcrap that a good chunk of society will often try too hard to instill into your thinking out of the window. If you can learn how to do that on your own, great, good for you. But if you have trouble, by all means reach out. Never let yourself remain stuck. New nurse here. Did my rotation for mental health, and one patient in particular took quite an interest in me. He was very polite and very kind. He was chatting up a storm, answered everyone's questions, and repeatedly asked my name. Later, we got to look at patients' files, and I got his. He had a psychotic break and started hearing God. She told him her name was Courtney and that she had chosen him and he was to find her and marry her. Guess what my first name is? Courtney. They ended up moving me to another part of the hospital after that because he was quite interested. Can confirm, I am definitely not God. Way too much responsibility. Coping with stress in your relationships by walking away from conversations, saying you've had enough, or going silent. Coping with feelings of insecurity and anxiety by lashing out at your partner. Example, asking a bunch of questions about one of their acquaintances instead of saying, I feel insecure for these reasons, please talk through it with me. Been a couples therapist for 10 years, now clinical director of a private practice. So many more, but those are two of the most prevalent in couples work. Tech here, so bottom of the totem pole, but I'll offer my opinion. Normal is not the right qualifier in my opinion. Psychology isn't like physiology, where you can go in and they can run exploratory tests on you to find out you're sick in a way that hasn't manifested symptoms yet. That's why your doctor will screen you for certain common or devastating disorders. The way I learned about mental illness was the 4 Ds: dysfunction, deviation, distress, and danger. Dysfunction means it gets in the way of you doing your job, school, or whatever. Deviation means it's not something everyone is going through. Distress means you're not okay with it. Danger is self-explanatory. You come in with some or all of the 4 Ds, and we form a treatment based on a set of symptoms that you most closely match. Then we treat the symptoms. The point of all this is to say, mental illness exists on a spectrum where one end may be so subtle that it only informs a person's personality, whereas the other end is completely debilitating and can get a person killed. You may know someone with features of an illness. In fact, I'd be surprised if you didn't. But if they don't want or need treatment, then they shouldn't be diagnosed. The best example is autism. Someone high on the functionality side of autism will do quite well in life. In fact, it is actually quite fair to discuss if autistic people live better lives than their counterparts. The answer would be entirely based on what you value in a quote-unquote good life. The next group of people are objectively suffering from their condition. They may have a chemical imbalance in their brain that causes them to be more anxious or sad than their counterparts. However, if it doesn't have enough impact on that individual, then they may go their entire lives without really needing to be checked out. To answer your question, if someone feels like their life would benefit from the field of psychology, then they need to get checked out. The hurdle that professionals face is educating people on what kinds of things psychology can help with. That is just to say that many different extremes of certain traits can be a symptom. However, you do have to make sure it is abnormal for that person. Not everyone who doesn't like people is clinically isolative. Not everyone who has lots of intimacy with multiple partners is hypersexual, and not everyone who doesn't brush their teeth is depressed. It takes no time at all to learn the different symptoms of different disorders. The rest of the time at school will be spent finding how to tell if those traits are a symptom or just who that person is, and of course what to do about it. Often the question of why is important in mental illness. Not participating in something you used to love may be anhedonia, or you may have just lost interest. Your medical doctor should never have to ask you why you have swollen lymph nodes. Your therapist should absolutely ask why you want to get a divorce. He cheated on me is not a symptom, but he's not my husband anymore, he is an imposter that looks like my husband, but he is an Al-Qaeda spy sent to kill me is, most likely. Emotional regulation. I see typical kids that just can't handle anything. It's terrifying. They are going to have a very difficult journey ahead unless they seek help. Dismissing your own feelings, your own thoughts, and your own internal voice saying something isn't right because others around the world have it worse. Devaluing your thoughts and emotions is a quick path down to making them louder and more painful. Rage and anger outbursts. I'm shocked by how much bad behavior during an adult tantrum is written off with little or no concern. Oh, that's just how he gets when he gets mad. He'll calm down. No, adults should be able to regulate their anger and handle it appropriately. Everyone gets angry. That is totally normal. But we shouldn't find ourselves escalating so easily and responding in ways we later regret. Trauma reactions. They are very normal for the situation but are not healthy or easy to deal with without help. Our bodies and brains hoard survival responses, so I see a lot of people struggling with unhealthy coping skills or habits that at one point kept them safe and helped them survive. This can range from large mood swings, emotional or physical disassociation, difficulty connecting with one's physical or emotional being, and difficulty identifying triggers. I get a lot of childhood abuse survivors who have had issues in therapy before due to this. If your therapist goes in assuming you are able to connect with and name feelings, identify what is weighing on you, etc., they won't be very helpful. Also, my normal therapy PSA is, whenever possible, please don't wait. There is no such thing as an issue too small for therapy, but waiting can cause something to morph into a way bigger issue. I know for a variety of reasons that isn't always feasible, but if you can, please do. People who made an impulse decision when they found out Hawaii was going to be nuked. What did you do, and do you regret it? Apologies for the Hawaiian mispronunciation in advance. Currently in Kailua on the island of Oahu. When my wife and I got the message, we were in bed. She asked me to make scrambled eggs with sausage, toast, and avocado. So I went downstairs and made breakfast as fast and best I could. Gave my pup some too, because he's going to dine like a king if it's really his last meal. After the false alarm, we made an appointment at an ultrasound office to see our unborn daughter. Life is precious. I started off trying to wake up my roommates to no avail. Then, in extreme denial, I walked outside my home to see if everyone else was hysterically preparing for a disaster. There were crowds of people running to their cars from the beach, the freeway was completely blocked, and yet there were also elderly people who didn't get a notification just watering their lawn as if nothing was happening. After the 5 minutes outside, which felt like an hour, I walked back in to see my roommates awake, switching through channels and seeing a banner on every channel that warned us to seek shelter, stay to the floor, and stay away from windows. Then I received a frantic call from my mom, from California, in tears saying how much she loved me, and then calling my dad and 2 sisters saying it could be the last time they might talk to me. My 12-year-old sister felt so rushed and said she loved me, but didn't know what else to say. I could hear my other 6-year-old sister say, "How could Ryan be dying? There's no way." At this point, my biggest fear was no longer dying, it was the thought of my family I'm leaving behind. I told them how I live in an area with low population and away from military bases, and I should be fine with my water and food reserves. Mid-call, I receive an incoming call from my uncle who lives on the island. I figured he had important news that was relevant, so I told my family I had to hang up. He told me it was a false alarm, so I proceeded to tell everyone else. And that concluded my most stressful 30 minutes ever. My best friend is vacationing there. She crawled into bed with her 3- and 5-year-old daughters and held them while accepting that they were going to die. Her husband called from a fishing boat trip to say he loved them and wished he was with them. My grandma told us she bought MREs on Amazon when she got the alert. We had to actually explain to her how that wouldn't have helped. When I heard about it, my 12-year-old daughter called from a shelter at a basketball game she was cheering for. Neither my wife and I received any cell notification, so we looked at each other and decided that by this point, if something is coming, we don't have time to seek shelter, so just hope for the best and let the other kids sleep. I have a coworker that ran red lights taking his family to a hospital basement for shelter where a woman was forced to give birth. 100% don't regret my approach to this. Personally, I slept through it. I woke up to the second, "lol, never mind," alert. Though my dad was down at the beach taking pictures, and he told me later that he fully intended to just stay there and hang out. My mom had thought her phone had a virus, so she didn't do anything.
807, ballistic missile threat inbound to Hawaii. Seek immediate shelter. This is not a drill. 845, lol, never mind.
Hawaii resident here. While I did make the impulse decision, the people around me did. I was sleeping when the announcement came out, and the others in my house didn't decide to wake me up. They said, if I was gonna die, might as well let me die in my sleep. We all became tired of the news after 2 hours. It just became annoying. Cleared out the fridge and hid in it for 6 hours. Got the alert with 2% battery, so had no idea it was fake. Went to Honokohau to dive. Figured 100 feet underwater was as good a place as any. No boom. My dad lives in Molokai, population of 8,000 or so. I called him when I heard about it, asked him about it. He said, 1, he didn't think it was real anyway. 2, a nuke from North Korea would be small and aimed at one of the population centers, Oahu, Maui, Big Island, and would not kill him. And 3, if 1 and 2 were wrong, he couldn't do much to stop it. He just had breakfast on the lanai like usual. Side note, for mainlanders, a lanai is a deck and lanai is another island. I ate all the leftover lasagna in my fridge. I figured that if crap's about to hit the fan, I better carb the heck up. I texted my mother, I need to tell you I love you. In case everything goes wrong, please tell everyone I love them and I've had a wonderful life. I'm very happy. She called me in a panic and I told her I loved her. She asked me if I was going to leave and I told her I was going to stay with my husband no matter what. I ended the call because I didn't want her to hear me die if it did happen. Then I kissed my husband and we held each other on the couch. It was a good day. My wife and I had just sat down to eat at Cafe 100 in Hilo on the Big Island when we all got the alert. I don't know if it's because we were both first responders or what, but we just continued eating while trying to check the internet to see if it was real. I know it said not a drill, but it was just so, surreal? The owner sent his employees home and sat with us. I remember thinking that this is an island, there's no place to go, And I already paid for this meal, dang it. I got on the emergency services scanner for the island and heard someone confirm it wasn't real, about 15 minutes before the actual alert went to everyone, so that was good. I'm just mad that the first place the government went to confirm it was false was freaking Twitter. We had next to no internet connection because everyone was jamming the signal, and Twitter is terrible anyway. Why not send an all clear on the phones ASAP? It was 8:07 a.m. and I was sitting in my hotel room in Waikiki browsing Reddit, saw the alert and immediately turned on the news and started going to Twitter. I didn't hear any sirens, no news. It was eerie enough to question, so I went outside my door and saw people yelling and people calling loved ones. I was glad I stayed calm, but hotel staff was running out of the building and the lobby was a crap show for about 20 minutes. From my point of view, the locals seemed scared it was their home and livelihood. I was on an island 2,395 miles away from home, so if I was gonna die, at least there was nice weather. My friend who goes to college on the island said campus was an absolute crap show. All I regret is filling my emergency water containers right behind the car. So now I'm blocked in the garage by 150 gallons of water. I felt like this alert showed me that I can keep calm and that I'm a bit apathetic towards death, and I'm pretty proud of myself. I got drunk for the first time in 4 years of sobriety. Oops. I made an impulse decision to stay in bed with my wife. Nowhere to go for safety, no time to get there anyway. Might as well be comfortable in my bed with someone I love. My 70-year-old dad ate 2 loaves of bread while hiding in his closet. He said he only regrets it because he has to buy more bread now. This man was gonna die crammed full of bread. I can't stop laughing. Well, I don't live in Hawaii, but as someone who's planned for some of this stuff, I'd caution against just resigning yourself to die. Depending on a lot of different factors, you could easily survive. A woman survived Hiroshima 300 meters from the hypocenter of the blast because she was in a sturdy building. The man sitting on the steps outside became a shadow on the pavement. The typical yield you could expect to hit a counter-value target like a city is below 1 megaton, probably closer to the range of 150 to 300 kilotons. If you don't live downtown, the likely center of the target, and are at least 2 miles from the hypocenter, then you stand at least a 50% chance of surviving, which goes up exponentially if you take even basic steps to survive, like hiding in a windowless room. There are so many different factors to consider. Is the weapon set for ground detonation or airburst? If airburst, what altitude? What direction is the wind blowing? Fission versus fusion ratio, local geography and proximity, and so many others. Point is, don't give up. You can make it. I never would have expected motivational advice from someone who's a doomsday prepper. I regret not calling my parents. I was in total denial mode and only called my fiance to ask if he got the alert too. He was working at Honolulu Airport, where the scene was more chaotic. He didn't think he'd ever see me again. I'm including details on how the airports were. All the flights were grounded. He was at H&L at the time, and passengers started walking off the aircraft. The captain eventually deplaned everyone. Security and TSA were as clueless as everyone, and couldn't direct anyone to shelter because there really isn't one. Some people ran out the terminal, presumably to get to their cars and drive home. I was at Hilo Airport at the time, but some tourists were huddled together, praying and or crying. We managed to get our car before all the rental stands closed up. He also said at Kona, TSA allowed all passengers through to seek shelter inside. Not sure where though because it's open air. When the all clear came through, all passengers had to exit and be rescreened, causing massive flight delays. I was in the living room changing my 2-month-old son's diaper. My wife was in the bedroom sleeping in. I hear the alarm go off on my phone a couple feet away and just think, oh, it's just one of those Amber Alerts, and go back to changing his diaper. A second later, my wife comes up running out of the bedroom screaming that we were going to die. I kind of froze up. All I could think about was how helpless I felt and how I couldn't do anything to save my newborn son. My wife was running around the house grabbing diapers and formula for the baby, and I was just slowly finishing changing his diaper because I couldn't imagine that something like this could happen. After about 2 to 3 minutes, I sort of snapped back to reality and focused only on getting my son and wife to some sort of safety. I live in a relatively small beach house with very thin walls, so I knew it wouldn't do anything, but I told my wife we would be safest in the bathroom in the middle of our house. It really wasn't an impulse decision, but throughout the whole thing, I didn't even think to call or text any of my family on the mainland. If you had asked me what I would do if put in this situation, I would say I would call my parents and tell them I love them, but I didn't even think of that. I just thought about how much I love my wife and son, and how sad I was that I wouldn't be able to see who he would become when he grows up. This has really given me a completely different perspective on life, and makes me sad that I didn't even think to say goodbye to my family back home. TLDR, I didn't think to call anyone back home and could only think about my wife and newborn son. It's funny how he phrases this as if it's something he regrets, but honestly, he should be glad that his first instinct was being with the people he cared about the most who were with him. Reading this next one, I can only think of a movie like Shaun of the Dead. In the chaos of figuring out where to seek shelter, we ended up deciding to go to the hospital that my wife works at. She's a nurse. Figuring we could maybe help out with the flood of people that will be coming to the hospital with injuries. We have about 20 minutes from the time an alert is received until the missile hits. We were up against that limit when I pulled into a parking spot I found on the street. My wife grabbed my son and ran for the hospital. I grabbed some change and started paying the parking meter. My wife turned back and yelled, "What are you doing?" I yelled back, "We have to pay the meter. Even if the world is going to end, we're not savages." We didn't get a parking ticket, so no regrets. I was in a hostel, and I'm a male, and all of the other people in the hostel room I was in were women the same age as me. We all got the text at once and looked at each other. I knew what I had to do. Awkwardly comfort them with jokes while they cried. Not very romantic. Had an impulse panic attack. 195 out of 100 wouldn't recommend. Sorry, is 195 out of 100 your rating or your blood pressure? I was at a laundromat and my wife called me all panicked after receiving an alert on her iPhone. I told her that it was probably a mistake because I didn't receive it on my Samsung phone and that it must be a technical glitch or something. Also, it seemed like there should have been sirens, emergency news broadcasts, and a full-on national or military notice rather than just a notice to iOS users. In hindsight, I was right and seemed like Joe Cool, but I now feel like I should have reacted more and taken it seriously. I don't want the last moments of my life to be me saying, "It's probably nothing." I was a dismissive jerk to my wife who was genuinely freaking terrified, and I regret that. I was at work here on Maui. My wife was at home with the kids and I called them to calm them down. Once I realized that we're all together, I went to the 3rd floor of a building with some coworkers and waited for the big bang or whatever was to come. I told my big Samoan boss that we should just hug. This way they would find us frozen in time like the folks they found in Pompeii after Mount Vesuvius. Things were a little awkward the rest of the day. Rolled out of bed and told my boyfriend, well, how about I make us one last cup of coffee before we die? And proceeded to the kitchen to brew a small pot. All I wanted was one last time to do one of my favorite things. Sit and talk stories with him with coffee and cigarettes in the morning. Maybe it wasn't so impulsive, but there was something about it being the last time to ever do that. My uncle and his family live in Hawaii. He's been cheating on his wife for 2 years. We all found out about it in a mass text he sent 5 minutes after the emergency text went out. He wanted to clear the air before he died. I imagine that family reunion didn't go quite well. Late to respond here, but I'll throw mine in. I work at a huge tourist location on Oahu. Pretty quickly after the alert went out, we started herding all of our guests into large buses and moving them to a huge World War II bunker we have on property. In the middle of directing guests on where to go, I realized I hadn't clocked in yet and decided that if I was going to die in a thermonuclear detonation, I might as well be getting paid for it. I clocked in, then hopped a small bus with a few of my friends and workmates and headed toward the bunker. Once we got there, we decided that we really didn't want to die in a concrete cave surrounded by people we really didn't like. So we just kept driving to the other side of the property and hung out in the back of a big valley for a few hours. So, I guess the impulsive thing I did was purposely avoid shelter and instead go somewhere beautiful? I told my girlfriend not to worry about it and go back to sleep. Her mom called her not even a minute later, crying, telling her to wake up and that she was rushing home now. She thought I wasn't scared, but if it were real, we wouldn't be able to do anything about it, so I just wanted her to be in my arms for our last moments. I live pretty close to a town center, so for me, I looked at my girlfriend and said, "I love you and I hope it's fast." Sat in bed with her looking at pictures of our trip we took to Big Island and just was with her. The weirdest part is basically just living today. Yesterday, I fully accepted I was gonna die, so it's weird having to just live with the idea that I didn't. It's good, mate. You've seen the worst, and now you can take stock of what is really important and adjust your life accordingly. I have a favorite cup that I use all the time. One day, I will drop it and it will break. This is the inevitable end for a cup, but I will still be devastated that it broke. I will curse myself for not being more careful as I pick up the pieces. But if I accept now that the cup is already broken, then every moment with it is precious. This is some Master Oogway levels of philosophy right here. I swallowed a bunch of popcorn seeds. I thought it'd be really funny if people found a bunch of popcorn around my burned body. I came out on social media. I don't completely regret it, but I definitely lost some friends, and a lot of my relationships with my friends have become really awkward. Hi everyone, I just want to say thank you to everyone for being so kind. I can't believe I got this many responses. I promise I'm doing fine. I have some really good friends who are helping me get through this. I had some idea of who were the friends that I'd thought I might lose before I came out, but even though I expected it, it still kind of hurt. Thanks everyone for the comfort and advice. Luckily, the only bomb that dropped that morning was in my bathroom, and it too took 40 minutes to clear. On a more serious note, I realized only last night that I kept my sanity intact due to dumb luck. For me, it was because I took the kids out late the night before, and we were all home all together. After digesting the stories of my friends and family, I realized that if my children had been at school or away with their mom, or if we had been driving in the middle of Maui somewhere, I'm pretty sure I would have absolutely lost it. I woke my 2 young girls and told them we were making a fort in my walk-in closet, the only room with no windows. From there, it was a surreal 10 minutes where I grabbed everything I could think of that would be helpful. Water, juice, granola bars, blankets, shoes, tablets for the kids. At one point, I mentally decided I needed to stop gathering items from rooms with glass windows and retreat into the closet. At that point, I just put on my game face with the girls and furiously tried to find out what I could with my phone. I exchanged a few texts with loved ones and took a call from my ex, making sure I had heard. I realize now that I was spared a lot of mental trauma because I had my family with me. I was doing the best I could for them, and basically, I didn't have to make a lot of hard decisions. I read a lot about the anguish of separated family, about those at soccer games, shopping at farmers markets, and those who had no idea what to do with those who they needed to protect, and those who they wanted to but couldn't contact. I'm glad my girls and I were spared the visuals of the panic. Later, I went to a sunset party which had a newfound vigor as friends embraced each other a bit harder and half joked, "I'm glad you're alive." I was in my living room sitting next to my husband and sleeping 2-month-old. Saw the alert on my phone, we grabbed the baby and his pacifier and went and sat in the bathroom. I started calling people who work on base to see if they knew anything. My husband was checking Twitter. Saw something about it being fake, went back out into the living room to check the local news. Saw the alert there, went back to the bathroom. The siren started going off, and I got there holding my 2-month-old baby, crying, thinking we were going to die, and I had no way to protect him. Got the false alarm message, and husband took the baby back out to the living room while I cried for a while longer in the bathroom. So, no major impulse decision, just a what the heck do I do, and cool, the best option I could think of in this moment is to sit in the freaking bathroom. I live near Pearl Harbor. I think the sirens I heard were coming from there. Either that or Hickam. My boss lives there and heard them too. I only heard them for about 5 seconds. Also, as for hiding in the bathroom, it is the only room in our house with no windows. Although pretty sure where I live it wouldn't have mattered. We would have been dead. Also, my husband and I grew up in the Midwest, so for tornadoes or severe thunderstorms, we would always either sit in the basement or bathroom. We don't have a basement here in Hawaii, so the bathroom it was. Also convenient for, the nervous craps and all. I woke up to people calling me about the alert, looked at my phone and read the message. I started searching the internet for answers, and there was zero coverage, which made me even more scared because I thought it was some kind of government conspiracy to not let the rest of the world know what was happening. I go to the Hawaii subreddit, and everyone is saying that they got the alert, but no info on whether the threat is real. Thinking about my life, I started to feel content with my inevitable death. Then I imagined my last moments slowly burning in intense pain, and that thought was followed by a minor anxiety attack and involuntary shaking for the next 30 minutes. I was hiding out at home with my best friend. Decided to hold her hand and tell her I had feelings for her, considering we were going to die and all. She didn't feel the same way. It's awkward now, and I'm worried for my friendship with her now. This didn't happen to me, but my friend, who is currently visiting his grandfather on the Big Island. He told me that right after he received the first alert to seek immediate shelter, he went down a couple homes to where the Clintons were staying to ask the Secret Service guys what was going on. Apparently, they were all in gas masks and ready to go. My friend, before receiving the false alarm alert, said he made a mimosa, said goodbye to his family, and planned to go sit on the beach to watch, as he described it, the fireworks. Wait, the Clintons? I regret telling our children what we thought was happening. My oldest child is 7. We explained it very simply with as little detail as we could, but geez. We told him a bomb was on the way from North Korea. We told him about the missile defense systems that all we could do was hope that they worked. We took away a lot of his innocence, and he's really shook up still. Afterwards, we told him about Mattis and how he's so smart and helps run the military to keep us safe. We couldn't think of anything comforting to say about the president, so my husband told him cool stories he's read about Mattis. My younger child is autistic and was just mad that the plans changed again. He was annoyed that the missile didn't come and didn't understand that the message was a mistake. He felt better when we went back to our original plan to hit the beach. I'm stationed on a nuclear sub in Pearl Harbor. I was on watch when it happened in the engine room. We had the whole duty chain of command in the reactor control room, and they told us they were going to evacuate all unnecessary personnel. We emergency closed the shielded volume of the reactor compartment so that we could get everyone off of the sub and into a floating support vessel docked near the ship. In hindsight, we should have just got all of the sailors into the reactor compartment and dogged the hatch. We'd have a pretty strong pressure barrier, and it has probably the best shield for a nuclear blast in the closest vicinity. It's sufficient to keep the crew from getting exposed to excessive amounts of radiation while the reactor is critical. Shields work both ways, so probably best to hug the shutdown reactor as opposed to getting vaporized topside. This will probably get buried, but I woke up at about 7:30 on Saturday morning to go check out some garage sales. I recently went through a tough breakup with my girlfriend of a year and a half, and I thought it'd be a nice way to stay busy and keep my mind off things. So I sat up in bed, took a huge rip off my dab pen, and hopped in the car to make my way down the mountain into town on the Big Island. About a mile down the road, my podcast stopped playing and my phone started blaring. I picked it up and read the message on the screen. Incoming missile. Take shelter immediately. This is not a drill. I rubbed my eyes and I couldn't believe the words that I was reading. I read them again and again before I pulled over, and as I was making a U-turn, I noticed everyone in their cars looking up from their phones with looks of horror on their faces. I'll probably never forget that. When I got in the door, I called my ex-girlfriend who was working at the Four Seasons, where she said people were losing their mind. I told her I loved her and how sorry I was for everything. She asked if her roommates could come to my house if they needed, and I said of course. Then she said she had to get back to work, and I begged her to leave if we got any more info. After we hung up, I went out to my back porch and looked to Oahu, and that's when I started hearing jet engine noise. It was getting louder, and I was running around to see if it was an airplane. Never did see a plane. I was terrified. No other way to put it. Last night we spent the night together for the first time in 10 days. She slept in my arms while I silently just laid there in the dark. Didn't sleep all night long because I missed that feeling so much. I didn't want to waste it by closing my eyes and passing out. I know we aren't going to get back together. It was a messed up day. This mistake shouldn't be swept under the rug. I feel like it was a very personal violation of public trust and people need to be fired at the very least. I hope no one ever has to go through that kind of fear and uncertainty ever again. I've heard stories of people I know who were sitting in bathtubs with their kids hysterically crying, people abandoning their cars and running on foot with their families. I want whoever is in charge of civil defense and the person who hit that button to be fired on the spot. Forget them. It's unacceptable. Doctors of Reddit, what is the most stupid thing a patient has said trying to correct you? I asked a patient complaining of dizziness if she had ever been diagnosed with vertigo. The daughter chimed in and said, No, she's a Libra. I then laughed hysterically at her awesome joke. She was dead serious. Patient comes in with abdominal pain. I think it's my gallbladder, they say. Looking over their chart, I see their gallbladder was removed 20 years ago, so that is impossible. I mention this, to which they reply, yeah, but it grew back. Yes, I know there are a number of other things it could have been. A retained stone crossed my mind, but after 20 years, I found this unlikely. She also had this scar to vouch for the surgery. There was definitely a psychosocial element to the case. I took care of a child that got chickenpox. The mother was strongly anti-vax, but was yelling at me, how can modern medicine not have a treatment for chickenpox? She couldn't grasp the concept that we do, she just refused it for her child. Sir, I need to know why you stopped taking your antiretrovirals for your HIV. Well, I met this witch online that… Wait, did you say witch? Yeah, she sent me a bunch of herbs every month to cure my HIV, and they worked. Last time I checked, I was cured. Where and what test did you do to know you were cured? I made an online test that the witch told me to. There were a lot of random questions, but in the end, it said that I was free of HIV. Okay, we will need to do a blood test to confirm that. Now, can you tell me which herbs you were consuming? I don't know the name, but I have them right here. He points at his backpack. May I take a look? Sure. I opened the bag and what I saw was nothing but grinded oregano with something that smelled like chlorine. The patient sadly died from a severe sepsis a month later with a highly resistant microorganism, just because a witch in a website told him to stop taking his meds. A mother brought her 14-year-old daughter to the ER due to hypogastric pain and spotting. We asked the daughter when was her last period. She said 2 months ago. We asked her for her sexual history, thinking this might be an ectopic pregnancy. The mother kept butting in, saying that she is still a virgin and she has no boyfriend. We left it at that until her mother went out to go to the bathroom. The patient admitted that she had sexual intercourse with a classmate of hers. We requested for pregnancy test and HCG titers. It really looks like ectopic pregnancy. We advised the mother that her daughter needs immediate surgical intervention. She refused to believe us, saying that the lab results are unreliable and untrue. She keeps on saying that her daughter is a virgin. She stormed out of the ER with her daughter that looks really in pain. I had a patient once with family members who were some of the most frustrating people I've ever dealt with. The patient was morbidly obese and had open sores and wounds in all her skin folds. Cleaning her when she was first admitted was like some sort of disgusting clown car. We found a floral pillowcase shoved under one fold, and what we think was a smashed bread crust in a fold near her groin. Anyway, because of her weight, she wasn't a candidate for surgery, and therefore there was nothing our team could do for her. I think about 5 or 6 different meetings were held with her family to discuss her prognosis. Her daughter told the attending physician he didn't know what he was talking about, and that she had been this sick before and pulled through. Her pH was so low, it just read as below 6.8, and her blood pressure was a solid 60/25, despite every vasopressor under the sun running at 3 times the max doses. When the charge nurse pointed out her blood pressure on the monitor, the daughter said, "Psh, I've seen lower." When she finally died, her family was livid that we didn't save her. We coded her for 20 minutes, and they told us we should have continued for at least an hour. I felt terrible that her last days were spent in such torture, all because her family was in such denial about her condition. Had a patient with atrial fibrillation that needed to be on anticoagulation. I chose Pradaxa and the patient said, no, that one doesn't have any antidote. In fact, it's the only new oral anticoagulant that has an approved reversal agent. Patient refused to believe me, like I got some bonus for killing her or something. 1-year-old hospitalized with ingestion of unknown drug. No immediate signs or symptoms. Mother says it's heroin from her brother's stash. Urine comes back positive for meth. Mom gets very angry and defensive and tells us it's just heroin and we should stop accusing her of having meth. Like, lady, why do you think letting your toddler try heroin is so much nobler? Another one I remembered back from my GP days out in the middle of nowhere. Lady comes in with itching of the scalp. I look at her head and she has matted, greasy, extremely dirty hair that actually smelled. I've seen a lot of dirty people, but it was really something else. She wanted medication. I suggested she wash and comb her hair regularly for a few days and see if it would get better. She said, and what if I wash my hair and it doesn't get better? Well, I'm sure you can accumulate the filth again in 10 years or something, so it's not a permanent loss. Lady comes in with shortness of breath. We check her troponin levels. They're elevated. Ma'am, you're having a heart attack. No, I'm not. Yes, you are. No, I'm not. Her PCP came into the ER and fired her as his patient. She signed in against medical advice and left. She died the next day of a freaking heart attack. Yeah. I introduced myself to a patient as doctor, your anesthetist. Patient said that I could not be a doctor as anesthetists aren't doctors. Not long after, another patient asked me if I had to go to uni to be an anesthetist, and still another asked me if I had to know as much as a pharmacist. The number of patients I have seen who are acutely unwell because they stop their medication does my head in. Almost always, the reason they stop the medication is because the condition they were taking it for went away, as a result of the medication. Shaking my head. Totally irrelevant, but I kind of think anesthetists are rad. The only time anyone has been able to hit one of my veins first time with no waggling around on my arm was when I had to be knocked out. Everyone else struggles to get my veins, even when I'm hydrated. Fasting for surgery and no liquids, still got a first shot. I was impressed. Also, I have pet rats, and anesthesia is risky AF for them. And not only is my rat vet's head nurse, small animal anesthetist rad as heck, but every time my rats have had surgery, they've gone well and recovered from the anesthesia well. And I guess I just appreciate that no anesthetists have done me any wrong. Oh my gosh. Y'all don't get enough credit. Ophthalmologist here. Told patient he needed reading glasses, which he didn't believe. I explained that everyone develops presbyopia eventually. Come on, George Clooney doesn't wear reading glasses. A, yes he does, and B, not sure why you're comparing yourself with him. This one's so petty but kind of funny. Had a female patient. Her mom asked me to adjust her scrotum. Trying not to burst out laughing, I said, "Your daughter's scrotum?" She acted like I was stupid and pointed to the back of her neck. I knew she wouldn't listen, as she was so convinced till I stopped arguing with her. And I also wanted her to go around saying it to other people. Med student, but a patient was telling me about how a doctor suggested she may have shingles of the eye, trying to get me to laugh at the other doctor because apparently shingles of the eye is a ridiculous concept. You can totally get shingles in your eye though. The time I was telling the family that the patient is going to die and her lab results, pH 6.6, lactic acid 25, are not compatible with life, and they said that they were pretty sure she would wake up if I put ice in her underpants. Well, yeah, we are not going to do that. She died and they still didn't believe me she was dead. They kept trying to wake her up.
I didn't have a heart attack. I had a myocardial infarction.
That's what a heart attack is, Chief. 20-year-old girl and her fiancé find out that she's pregnant. Me, partway through taking her history. Do you smoke cigarettes? Yeah, about a pack a day. You should definitely stop that. Well, my sister told me that if I stopped smoking, the baby would go into withdrawal and die. What? PSA, don't smoke if you're pregnant or planning on becoming pregnant. It's never too late to quit. Had a patient come into the ED for what was essentially a cold. Kept requesting antibiotics. Kept explaining that they wouldn't help her viral symptoms. But I did then sit down and give her a basic tutorial on the differences between bacteria and viruses and antibiotics and antivirals. Hopefully it was enough to help her in medical school finals the next week. The worst part is, I can't tell if this post is joking or not. I'm a doctor, but this was my nana, not a patient. She was drinking 11 cups of coffee a day, which is too much. We held an intervention while visiting for dinner, and when we told her she was addicted, she responded, No, the coffee is good for me. It helps me with my shaking. She cut down once we explained to her what drug withdrawal was. I work in a burn ICU, which is a weird little specialty, but the number of patients and visitors that come in knowing absolutely everything is annoying as heck. Mayonnaise, mustard, and butter are not acceptable burn treatments. Leave the condiments in the fridge. I do not appreciate having to scrub 3 jars of mayo off grandma. I had an incredibly sick patient with large burns and ARDS, a serious respiratory complication that makes it very difficult to oxygenate someone, even with maximum settings on the ventilator and continuous medication to open up the lungs. He was then put in a rotating bed that we bolt patients into and rotate them face down. He was also on continuous dialysis from sudden kidney failure. Anyway, So patient, incredibly sick, had 10 to 12 IV bags going at once. Just a general mess of a person. Here comes the family member with medical experience. These are the worst. They always end up being a transcriptionist or a nursing assistant at a nursing home or something. But they enjoy coming in and trying to run the show. Some highlights from said medical expert before I kicked her out of the unit. "Why aren't you paying attention to his brain waves?" Yes, she yelled everything. She was pointing to the display on the ventilator, which has everything to do with breathing and nothing to do with the brain. "Why isn't he on propropanol? It's negligent to not have him on propropanol." She meant propofol. Think Michael Jackson. But he was on ketamine and Versed because those worked like a charm for him, and propofol was having some unwarranted effects on him earlier. "The dressings are dirty. You need to change them immediately." Okay, go away right now. 1, it takes at least an hour or so to change a full body dressing while they're on the rotating bed, and the patient was so sick that if we rotated him face down to face up to get the dressings on his front, the fluid shifting in his lungs would have likely killed him. Also, burned dressings get gross quickly. I was super irritated by the time I kicked her out. Never kicked anyone else out since, but geez, she was annoying. When I was a medical student, this middle-aged male patient from a rural area got it in his head that I knew absolutely nothing, and he was doing me a service teaching and talking to me. He was in colorectal clinic for something unrelated and started telling me about the gland on the back of his neck that would drain every so often. When he saw that I was unfamiliar with this particular gland, he gave me this knowing look, laughed, and started instructing me, the dumb little medical student, about this gland. Apparently everybody has this gland for the immune system, but that his would drain when he was stressed. No, sir, I was being polite, but you have a nasty abscess on the back of your neck. I was hoping that the patient would try to explain this medical wonder to my attending when he came in, but alas, he didn't. Med student here, but I have had 2 winners. When discussing a precancerous skin lesion on a patient, they opted to use their laser ray instead of classic treatment. It was a cancer laser ray that was bought online. It also apparently had frequencies for arthritis. They insisted that the vibratory frequency can be tuned to destroy cancer cells, just like a trained singer may be able to use her voice to break a crystal glass. The patient did not believe that cancer cells and regular cells would have the same frequency. Another patient insisted that his cancer had been properly treated at home with baking soda. He gave me a website like pH Kills Cancer or something. The patient also had with them a surgery report in which it appears their baking soda consumption resulted in buildup of abnormal calcium in the wall of the stomach, which had to be removed. Veterinarian here. The anti-vax movement has been slowly seeping into my profession for years, but in my area it's gotten much worse recently. Almost every day now I have a client inform me on how toxic vaccines are and that I should talk to their dog's breeder because he or she is very informed. Most of the time I'm able to convince them that this is incorrect. However, some are still quite resistant. Vaccinating for rabies is not just a suggestion, it is the law, and my clinic has a policy that we don't let any of our healthy animals be vaccine-free. I've had a few clients walk out over this policy. I feel bad for their animals. These are the same kinds of clients that won't use flea and tick prevention on their obviously flea-infested dog, but will use lemongrass and peppermint instead. Spoiler, it doesn't work. Mom of baby. I don't vaccinate, it's against my religion. Oh really? Just out of curiosity, what religion is that? I'm Catholic. Not really a correction per se, but it made me laugh a lot. I've had a few patients express dissatisfaction that their Botox only lasted 3 months, and they suspected that I was diluting the Botox. Both statements are absolutely true and consistent. Why are you looking at my hip? I said the pain was in my knee. The hip bone's connected to the leg bone bone's connected to the foot bone. Woman with this weird abdominal cramping twitching presentation. I won't say stupid because she probably had some kind of undiagnosed dementia, but definitely the most bizarre. Ask her what she's feeling, why she's twitching her abdomen. It's like it's trying to get out. Like what's trying to get out, ma'am? My sperm. Ma'am, you don't have sperm. Oh. For those of you curious, by the time I saw her, last official diagnosis was pseudo-seizures. She had a tendency to start twitching parts of her body whenever we would start asking whether she had twitching in those areas. Ma'am, have you had any twitching in your legs? She looks at leg. Leg starts twitching. Yeah, I have. Woman with breast cancer. She was in the medical field too, so I'm unsure why she said the things she did. Perhaps she was still in denial? I don't know. Anyhow, so I was the intern when she came in for a chest tube insertion to drain her pleural effusion. It was obviously suspected to be malignant. After the procedure, I went home and the resident on call had to deal with multiple calls from the distraught staff in her ward, for reasons I shall explain below. The next morning I was told by said resident, sporting a haggard appearance and bloodshot eyes from a busy shift, that she was my problem now. With that, the poor man left for home. I go in to see her and first get accosted by ward staff, who tell me she legit refused all pain meds, right after procedure, which entailed a tube scratching against her parietal pleura. Ow. So I go in and am told by this woman who, let me remind you, was employed in the healthcare sector that the tube had been pushed in far too much and is stabbing her, and that I need to undo the stitch and pull it out a few centimeters. No lady, I'm not authorized to do that. The x-ray was fine, no intervention was necessary. I tell her she needs to take her meds if she wants the pain to get better, and she says, no joke, that pain meds will further spread the cancer and that I should know that being a student of medicine. And she further said, look, no need to tell anybody, you're a doctor. Use your own judgment and pull the tube out. She was adamant. My professor was going to be late that day, and I obviously wasn't going to do anything without his permission. I documented her refusal and went on my way. She left by the afternoon against medical advice. I feel bad for her, but she wasn't letting me help, so yeah. Doctor here. One we commonly get is, I know my body. Scoped a guy with knee pain. The joint looked perfect. Told him after the surgery, and he told us, no, my tendons are all torn. I know my body. Told a lady she was pregnant. No, I'm not. I just had a big lunch. I know my body. Absolutely, when something doesn't feel right and your doctor doesn't want to listen, seek a second opinion. You know how your body normally feels. But if someone has performed an invasive surgery to look at your joint or has seen a fetus on ultrasound, they probably know what they're talking about. Probably the legions of women that seemingly don't know how long it can take for an IUD to work and want it taken out because it didn't instantly stop their periods within a month. Also the women that came in with chlamydia but deny having had intimacy. Like, come on, I'm not your boyfriend. You don't need to lie to me. Implying that she would if you were her boyfriend? I feel like that's something that would need to be talked about. Woman had a bad yeast infection. Besides that smell, I also smelled feces. I asked if she wiped back to front. She said, yeah, but that's not why I have this. It's from drinking pop. Despite my assurances that it was not from drinking pop, she wouldn't believe me. I said, okay, you must be right. I'm just a doctor, and prescribed her the same thing I would have if she was an intelligent person. Gynecologist here. Imagine a revved up version of that dreadlocked beanie-wearing woman meme. It's not vagina anymore. It's pronounced vagina now.
Oh, yes, your vagina is looking very lovely today.
Your blood pressure is very, very high. You need to take the blood pressure medications I prescribed you. I don't need no pills, doc. All I need is Jesus. Well, you're about to be seeing Jesus very soon if you don't take your medication. Radiographer here, and the ED doctor gave me a request for soft tissue neck x-rays, and the doctor was pretty much like, don't question it, just do it. Anyway, after that patient had left the ED, doctor came in and told me that the gentleman presented to ED at 3 a.m. because he had hot milk 3 days ago and his tongue has been hurting ever since. The patient basically burnt his tongue, but was insisting on an x-ray to ensure nothing is wrong. Paramedic student here. Not the most stupid thing I've encountered, but the most common stupid thing. Do you have any pain anywhere else? Nah, all good. Then what do you take this specific medication for? Oh, that's for my back pain. Or, any past medical history? Nah. Ever been to hospital? Nah. Have you had a heart attack before? Yeah, how do you know? Has a massive personal medication bag with cardiac meds. While I am a doctor, this happened to my wife, also a doctor. Female patient came in complaining of infertility, said she and her partner had been trying to conceive for like 5 years and had tried everything. At one point she let the pronoun slip, she and I, and my wife said, wait, let's back up a minute. Turns out the woman had been in a hetero relationship for a few years and never got pregnant despite using no protection. She then entered a same-sex relationship and again never got pregnant even though she really wanted to, leading her to believe she was infertile. When my wife tried to explain that conception requires sperm, sourced from a male, as well as an egg, the patient was incredulous and exclaimed that she didn't need a man in my life and she didn't feel like being judged. Perhaps needless to say, the patient was lost to follow-up. When I was about 16, I went to the hospital with sharp pain in the lower right-hand side of my abdomen. It seemed pretty serious, so both my parents were with me, which was unusual because they're divorced. A doctor looked at my symptoms and said it looked like appendicitis. I groaned. I don't have an appendix, it was taken out. My parents said, yes you do. When I was 6, I had surgery to correct testicular torsion. I kept both my testicles. My parents politely told people I had my appendix taken out to explain why I was in the hospital. I accepted this as the actual reason for my surgery, so years later when I learned the location of the appendix, I assumed they did some kind of laparoscopic surgery through my scrotum to explain the scar there. I was very surprised to learn I do, in fact, have an appendix. The pain turned out to be from a sharp piece of chicken bone. All the ones I can remember follow the same theme. Patient misunderstands the difference between correlation and causality. The most striking example was a young man who was dying of AIDS. Doc, I was never sick a day in my life until y'all started giving me all these meds. Well, sir, while you still had a functional immune system, you didn't need these meds. HIV is a treatable illness these days if you actually take the drugs. If you believe the drugs are the problem and not the virus, well, you can still die from it very quickly. Variations on that theme are very common, unfortunately. I'm a family practitioner, and I had a family not want to vaccinate their newborn because they heard that vaccines were derived from monkeys' brains, and they didn't want their child to develop monkey-like characteristics. All I can think about is what kind of TV show would George in the Jungle be like if that were the plot. I'm a registered dietitian/nutritionist. I was counseling a patient who was morbidly obese, diabetic, and had severe peripheral neuropathy. He was also a chiropractor who had a hard-on for homeopathic remedies. I couldn't get out a full sentence without this guy trying to tell me that a dilution of whatever the heck would do the exact same thing. Finally, I just said, "Look, doctor, you need to cut the sugar and eat something in the vegetable family with every meal. You can drink whatever potions you want on top of that, but 30 years of drinking your distilled water has landed you here, in my office, with a broken pancreas and no feeling in your feet. So let's give this a serious try unless you want to take a chance with your flower remedies when the heart attack or stroke hits." Since a few people have asked, he got highly offended and filed a complaint with our VP of Patient Relations. I was ordered to do some bullcrap sensitivity training where I was told that I should have listened to his opinion on care and validated him as being heard. I was also told, by at least 3 non-clinicians, that since he was a chiropractor, I should have given more weight to his opinion since he was a licensed healthcare provider. I finished the training and promptly began looking for a new job. I can think of 2 cases. One involves family members instead of the patient. I had a patient who had a simple L4-S1 fusion. Did great postoperatively. Went home and hippie daughter introduced some allegedly probiotic therapy to speed healing, which actually introduced bacteria into the surgical site. 3 weeks later, we took him to the OR emergently to remove the hardware, and he spent 6 weeks in the hospital thanks to the massive staph infection introduced by a hippie. The other was a naturopath/witch doctor brought into our ED, initially unresponsive but regained consciousness. He had a ruptured MCA aneurysm. He insisted we try some alternative bullcrap to shrink the size of the bleed and heal it naturally before we would try the OR. His naturopath friend came in to do something while we took another patient to the OR. Went to convey the seriousness of the situation and he went unresponsive again, about 2 minutes after I left his ED room, to which we invoked an EM caveat and took him to the OR for definitive repair and clipping. He's now the naturopath who saved 5 lives, thanks to organ donation.
When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.